This boy was thrown from the top of a building. His life was never easy. He met Florshan and ended up being reborn as Attila. In a world where mages ruled everything, Attila didn't have a single drop of magic. Now, as a barbarian lost in the middle of the forest, he had to survive against monsters 5 times bigger than a bear. So he did the only thing he could. He picked up his axe and started fighting, until 10 days later, his body had become so strong that not even a bear could hurt him anymore. A system alert announces that the scenario's protagonist, Charles Einhard, has been found. Upon hearing this, a man immediately challenges him to a fight. To Charles, this sounds like complete recklessness. However, his opponent retorts that it is nothing less than courage. Confident, he declares that he will defeat him and walk the path of the sovereign. Soon after, a system window describes Charles Einhard as the strongest warrior in history. As the challenger prepares to begin, a notification appears, revealing he is the original author, now reincarnated as a mere extra. Then, they both charge forward, their swords clashing violently. The impact of the collision shatters the ground around them. In a swift move, the man leaps into the air to execute an attack. Still, the downward strike is blocked by his opponent's blade. Afterward, he lands some distance away. Calmly, Charles states that he has already memorized that move. He then raises his own sword, preparing to counterattack. Then, he unleashes a strike that cuts through the air toward his enemy. The force of the impact hurls his opponent backward. Without hesitation, Charles leaps and descends with his sword for a new attack. The man is thrown to the ground by the sheer violence of the blow. Even so, the opponent twists his body and charges in to attack again. The blade strikes his adversary directly in the chest. Firmly, Charles declares that this is the end. He then prepares to deliver the final blow. The attack pierces the man's chest and launches him into the air. At that moment, a massive pillar of energy descends from the heavens toward him. The collision causes a huge explosion, awakening a new power. At the center of the impact, the man remains, covered in wounds. In another scene, a man in a suit asks Mr. Sato Shota to sign the contract. Introducing himself as Sato Shota, he explains that he is a novelist who achieved miraculous success with his free 400-chapter series. He is the author of the heroic saga of the Sovereign. With that signature, his work would finally be turned into a game. Thus, all his efforts up to now would finally be rewarded. At that, he prepares to sign the document before him. Convinced, he believes a bright future awaits. However, that was just what he believed, until he suddenly found himself falling. A voice comments that he probably can't understand why this happened, leaving him confused on the ground. At the edge of the building, the man from the office advises him not to take it personally. He then states that this is all for Sato Shota's own good. Desperate, Sato begs to be saved, shouting that he's falling. In the end, the man simply remarks, "That's a terrible thing to say." Sato then wonders if he really said that out loud. Suddenly, the man's face distorts as he explains that he merely read his thoughts. At that moment, the writer realizes the figure before him isn't human. Immediately after, the stranger's foot comes down and stomps hard on the hand Sato had clamped on the ledge. A scream escapes as his fingers are crushed. In despair, he questions if this is the end of his life. He then screams that he still wants to live longer. His eyes lift toward the man at the top of the building. In that instant, an energy erupts from his body. The released force shatters the ground around him. A massive explosion of energy sweeps across the entire landscape. Among the wreckage, he wonders what this is. Seeing the city in flames, he questions if he was the one who caused all of this. Floating above him, the man asks if he possessed berserker and the authority of savagery. Soon after, the figure's hand reaches toward him. While he hangs suspended in the air, the stranger comments on his extraordinary power. He then claims that with this strength, Sato will now experience a new life. As his face begins to crack, he declares that this will happen in the world the writer himself created. Then he lets him go, saying they will meet again. The fall sends him plummeting toward an erupting volcano. He then lands with a violent impact on the ground. Staring at the landscape before him, he questions if any of this is real. Soon after, a system window welcomes him to the world of the heroic saga of the Sovereign. Faced with this, he wonders if this is the world from his own novel. He then turns, sensing movement coming from the forest. Seized by panic, Sato starts running desperately from a bear. The animal raises its paw, ready to strike. Without hesitation, he declares that he has no intention of dying in this place. At that moment, he spots an axe lying on the ground. He quickly grabs the weapon and charges toward the beast. The bear roars and prepares to attack. The blow lands directly on the animal's head. The creature falls hard to the ground, completely defeated. Staring at the downed bear, he questions what the hell is going on. Finally, looking at his own body, he asks out loud, "What the hell is this?" He had been pushed off a building by a mysterious man. As a consequence, He ended up being thrown into the world of the novel he himself had written. Furthermore, his body had evolved to a clearly superhuman level. At that moment, he begins to notice his perfectly trained biceps. He also observes his more robust chest and completely defined abdomen. He then questions the bulging muscles all over his body. Still, that wasn't the only thing that had changed. His senses were sharper than ever. For a moment, he sniffs the air around him. He recognizes the same beastly scent from before. However, he realizes that this time, there is more than one. Given the situation, he decides it's best to get out of there. Suddenly, a scream from the forest catches his attention. As he gets closer, he sees several bodies scattered on the ground among the trees. A woman surveys the scene, realizing all her companions are dead, while 4 bears roam the area. Soon after, the beasts spot her hiding behind a tree. She accidentally steps on a twig which snaps under her foot. One of the bears turns its head in her direction, and she stares back. Then, one of the creatures charges to attack her. The woman braces for impact, gripping her axes tightly. Even so, she accepts that she might die here, stating that she doesn't want this end. At that instant, Sato suddenly appears and throws a punch. His fist smashes into the bear's face with full force. Surprised by his own insane strength, he looks at his hand and then asks if she's okay. The woman, still stunned, asks if he is Attila. Confused, he stares at the figure kneeling before him and repeats the name, Attila. She remarks that they said Attila was dead, but quickly warns him to look behind him. The 3 remaining bears are charging toward him. As he turns to face them, he questions the number of enemies. Desperately, she yells that he can't fight them all. With a slight smile, he simply asks if he really can't. The beasts roar as they advance. This makes him want to find out if it's true, so he readies himself for combat. Dashing forward, he attacks one of the creatures. A punch hits the first bear as he starts to count. Without stopping, he leaps toward the second beast. A kick hits the second animal, and the count continues. The first 2 bears are already down on the ground. He then throws a punch at the last remaining bear. The third beast is hurled against a rock as the count ends. Planting his feet on the ground, he wields the axe. With a single motion, he delivers a precise strike. A bear's paw is completely severed. The woman watches, unable to react. He then charges forward and attacks the remaining creatures. Finally, he kneels over the body of the last bear. He then asks who the hell this Attila she's talking about is. Suddenly, the woman runs to him and hugs him. She says she believed he would come back alive. The hug catches him completely by surprise. Without letting go, she says everyone in the village will be happy, and urges him to hurry so they can leave. At that moment, a system window displays the profile of the character Attila, age 16. Immediately after, Attila's memories begin to flood his mind. The recollections start from the distant past. They move forward to the last memory before death. He begins to process all the new information. Among the memories, he discovers that Attila died during a bear hunt, a rite of passage into adulthood due to a man's conspiracy. The face of the one responsible for the betrayal appears clearly. He realizes he has been reincarnated as a barbarian extra, lamenting that he didn't become the protagonist. The woman asks what's wrong, but he reassures her, saying he's fine. He then notices the wounds on her leg. Crouching down, he tells her to get on his back so they can return to the village. She warns him that the village is 20 kilometers away, but he insists it's no problem and that he can't leave her there. Finally, he puts her on his back and starts running at high speed toward the village. In a lush green canyon, Attila leaps from the top of a cliff. During the high-speed descent, he even manages to grab a fruit from a tree. Right after, he remarks that it tastes delicious. He offers his companion a piece, but she simply refuses. They both arrive at a valley where the Black Wolf tribe's settlement is located. 2 tribe members are stunned as they believed Attila had been killed by a bear. Surrounded by everyone, he carefully observes the place and states that it's incredible. Everything around him perfectly matches the sketches that were once drawn. The landscape before him is none other than the world of the Black Wolf tribe itself. Facing the villagers, he claims this is the greatest reward an author could ever receive. An imposing man walks through the crowd and calls out Attila's name. Before him stands his father, the legendary warrior said to have single-handedly defeated an army of 5,000 men. Munzuk, chief of the Black Wolf tribe, stares at him intently. He then asks if his son doesn't have something to say to everyone. Firmly, Attila announces that he has returned. The tribe's leader pulls him into a tight hug. With tears in his eyes, Munzuk welcomes his son. The boy is left completely speechless at the scene. Moved, Munzuk declares that he has come back to life, just as the old seer had foreseen. He then shouts that the legend of the Black Wolf was true, and proudly states that he is overjoyed. The chief then announces a great feast to celebrate the day, promising food and drink until they can't take any more. At night, the tribe gathers around a bonfire, feasting and toasting to the great martial god king. Attila eats with satisfaction, commenting that he could eat forever. Just then, a man offers him a mug of drink, which he accepts without hesitation. In the background, the tribe's warriors dance while others play drums. The dance represents the legend of the great martial god king. The story tells how the legendary warrior was killed by his enemies, only to return from the dead. A dancer wields an axe, moving with great agility. She spins and executes each move with precision. With a swift spin, the dance intensifies even more. A short while later, the performance comes to an end. Thus, the legend of the savior who protected the village is born. The villagers celebrate with renewed enthusiasm. As he watches the celebration, he reflects that if this truly is the world of his novel, there's only one way back to the real world. That single exit is the fairy kingdom. It is the place where the most powerful magic users live, as that is where he placed the passage. Attila takes a bite of a piece of meat. At that moment, a man approaches and says he heard that Attila defeated 4 bears. Blida, a warrior of the Black Wolf tribe, praises him for the impressive feat. He then informs him that he is now part of the elite warrior group. For someone from the Black Wolf tribe, this is the greatest possible honor and also a requirement to become chief. For this reason, Blida invites him for a toast. Along with the toast, an intense power struggle silently begins. Attila stops the mug mid-air as he smells something strange. Noticing this, Blida asks what's wrong and why he isn't drinking. Straight to the point, Attila says it's better to stop talking and just fight. Blida replies that it's been a while and tauntingly comments that he's learned to say interesting things. He warns him not to get cocky as he still doesn't know what tricks were used. Blida then comments that the party has just begun and the night should be enjoyed to the fullest. Attila asks him to wait, but the warrior simply says goodbye and walks away with his men. Near the bonfire, a rabbit is being prepared for the meal. A boy approaches and tells Chief Munzuk that he was the one who hunted the animal. The leader smiles and says the boy will become a great warrior. He is completely different from his younger brother, Bleda. Having never had a father, the young man isn't sure how to act in this situation. If he had grown up with one, he imagines he would have spoken and received praise, just like that. Suddenly, Munzuk calls him closer. He then states he has something to give him. The chief then offers him the mark of the elite warrior, granted only to those who have defeated 3 or more bears in a single hunt. Munzuk asks if he's speechless, and comments that it's an honor any warrior would give their life for. He then rushes him to put on the mark. Attila tries to tie the sash, but realizes he's never done it before. Awkwardly, he stands there with the sash tied in a strange way. Munzuk asks what's wrong, and he explains that he hurt his hand a little and can't adjust it properly. Hearing this, the chief offers to tie it for him. While adjusting the sash, he comments that this reminds him of the day they first met. The knot sits perfectly adjusted on his waist. Munzuk stands up and says that Attila has grown a lot and worked hard to get here. The young man simply thanks him. The chief then places a hand on his head, ruffling his hair slightly. He says he should show more joy, but Attila replies that he feels embarrassed. Munzuk shouts that there's no reason for shame, as becoming an elite warrior at 16 is unheard of. The other tribe members start encouraging him to celebrate. Attila smiles at all the recognition. Munzuk raises his mug and proposes a toast to the proud warriors of the Black Wolf. All the men of the tribe raise their mugs in celebration. The young man toasts along with them, thinking that this life might not be so bad after all. Suddenly, a man's mug flies from his hand as he lets out a scream. Attila screams desperately for his father. In that instant, the tribe's chief is revealed, completely transformed. He wonders if the drink was poisoned, but Munzuk's sake has no strange smell. The young man holds his father and calls out to him repeatedly, but the only response is a fierce roar. Munzuk continues to roar, completely out of control. An analysis reveals he's under the effect of an uncontrollable fury. The tribe's chief begins to attack his own people. At that moment, Attila realizes that Bleda's target wasn't just Munzuk. The villagers run and scream desperately for help. The real goal was to kill everyone who admired the tribe's chief. Attila declares it's unforgivable to use Munzuk's own hands to hurt the people he values most. Munzuk charges forward wildly. The young man confronts him, begging him to wake up. As he tries to stop him, he's hit by an extremely powerful punch. He falls to the ground, realizing it's useless to keep trying. His father can't hear him. Even so, Attila gets up, saying, "This can't be real." Munzuk roars as his transformation completes. He then attacks with a devastating punch. The blow hits the ground, sending him flying from the force of the impact. Attila realizes he can't stop him with his current power. As the roars echo, the villagers flee in a panic. A boy runs to his mother, who falls to the ground. He shakes her, begging her to get up. The woman tells her son to go on ahead. Munzuk moves toward the two of them. She screams for him to run as fast as he can. The boy then grabs an axe from the ground. Turning around, he declares he will protect his mother. The tribe's chief prepares to strike the child. In that instant, Attila appears in front of them, blocking the blow with his own arm. He praises the boy's courage, and the boy calls him brother. He then yells for the others to take care of them. The tribesmen carry the mother and son away from danger. Attila turns and manages to catch another of Munzuk's punches. At that moment, he realizes that just stopping him was a naive thought. The tribe's chief readies another attack. He lunges forward at high speed, grazing Attila's face. The blow cuts his ear. Munzuk unleashes another brutal attack. The punch lands squarely on the young man's side. Attila spits blood and understands there's no more reason to hesitate. He grabs his father's arm, knowing there's only one option. The young man braces himself and decides to fight. The two face each other, ready for the confrontation. Munzuk charges, and Attila responds with a direct blow. A powerful punch hits Attila's face. In response, he retaliates with an attack to the chief's chin, which also lands. A vicious hook snaps his head back. Still, Attila presses forward with a rapid flurry of punches. The blows land on Munzuk's chest but have no effect. He realizes it won't be enough to take him down. Munzuk prepares to attack again. A moment later, the two exchange a swift series of blows. Attila is thrown violently to the ground. The tribe members watch the scene, completely shocked. Coughing, he tries to get up. Pushing himself off the ground, he struggles to catch his breath. A black wolf warrior is one who risks their own life to protect what is precious to them. And that was exactly what Munzuk had always stood for. Attila remembers his father would have protected the villagers, even at the cost of his own life. With this thought, he stands up and activates the heroic strength skill. The young man charges toward Munzuk. A powerful headbutt strikes the chief directly in the chest. The impact sends one of Munzuk's teeth flying. The tribe chief's body is thrown backward by the force of the attack. The tooth falls and sticks into the ground. Exhausted, Attila staggers backward. Moments later, he falls to the ground, wondering if this is the end. Munzuk remains standing as the transformation begins to fade. From the ground, Attila watches him, completely surprised. Munzuk stares at his own hands and asks what's happening. Attila remains on the ground, wondering if his father has regained consciousness. A system screen confirms that Munzuk has exited his rage state. Seeing this, he realizes his father has truly returned to normal. His gaze then fixes on an object lying in front of him. It was the needle that had been thrown earlier. Munzuk runs to him and asks if he's okay. Attila replies that he can hold on for now. Suddenly, the tribe's chief darts off in another direction. Bleda and his men are fleeing on horseback through the forest. The Fury Needle, created by the witch, wasn't supposed to be removed by a simple headbutt. However, it was dislodged by the special power Attila possesses. Bleda whips his horse to speed up their escape. Before disappearing, he tells Attila to enjoy his heroic moment, because it will all be over the next day. The group continues riding toward the north cave. At the entrance, Bleda orders his men to advance. They enter the dark cave, lighting the way with a torch. Suddenly, a roar echoes from the depths, making them tremble. A voice demands they return what was taken. Before them, a gigantic chained beast screams for them to return its cub. The divine beast of the Black Wolf tribe, the Forest Calamity, roars furiously. Bleda addresses the creature, calling it by its title. The beast tells them to be quiet, calling them cowards. One of the men holds a small cub, threatening to kill it. The small animal cowers in his arms. The mother begs them to stop. Bleda then orders the creature to go and destroy the Black Wolf tribe. The Forest Calamity roars in response to the command. Attila wakes up in a bed and sits up, holding his head. His body covered in bandages. He wonders if he passed out. Beside him, Munzuk is also lying down and greets him for waking up, making him turn in surprise. The young man asks if his father is okay. Munzuk replies that his body won't move yet, but tells him not to worry. Lying on his back, the chief says he heard everything and is deeply sorry. Attila retorts that it's not his fault, but that bastard Bleda's. Even so, Munzuk insists he failed to protect the villagers. He then declares he no longer has the qualifications to be the tribe's chief. Attila questions him, saying that's exactly what Bleda wants. Still, his father asks him to understand, stating that what happened was very serious. Suddenly, shouts echo from outside the door. A crowd of villagers bursts into the room. One of them yells not to push, saying the chief is still recovering. Another accuses someone of suggesting the visit. The argument continues about which idiot brought sake to visit a sick person. The woman Attila saved appears with her son and reassures him, saying that thanks to him, Everyone is fine. She states they've been protected by the chief in countless battles. She then says everyone knows how much he values the villagers and that they trust him. With tears in her eyes, she asks him to believe in them because they believe in their chief. Munzuk covers his face with his hand. The tribesmen raise their fists and shout that they will protect the Black Wolf tribe together. With his face covered in tears, he simply thanks them. Suddenly, someone runs into the room. The man stops before everyone and yells for them to listen. He announces that the forest calamity is attacking the village. Outside, the village is seen in flames, being destroyed. Amidst the fire, the forest calamity roars uncontrollably. The calamity of the forest was the legendary divine beast that, alongside the great martial king, protected the Black Wolf tribe. That's why the people of the Black Wolf village called it that with deep reverence. Suddenly, a man rushes in and calls for everyone's attention. He then announces that the calamity of the forest is attacking the village. Munzuk sits up in bed, confused, and questions what he just heard. Attila stands by the bed and says he'll go, but his father stops him. He warns him that it's reckless, as a human is no match for a divine beast. Even so, the young man approaches an axe and says he'll borrow it. With the weapon in hand, he promises to return it. Before leaving, he asks them to wait for him. Outside, the creature's roar echoes menacingly. One of the men points toward the beast, and Attila turns to face it. Seeing the sight, he comments on the creature's immense size. Just then, Blida and his men appear, stating that he's late. He asks if Attila really thought they would wait for everyone to recover. The young man then shouts Blida's name. In response, he says Attila is naive, just like his father. Readying his axe, the young man challenges him to fight instead of just talking. Blida praises his bravery, saying it's worthy of the great martial king's reincarnation. However, he reveals that he won't be the opponent and raises his hand to give a command. The creature's paw strikes the ground violently. Attila blocks the blow with his axe. The calamity of the forest appears behind Bleda, awaiting his command. Confused, the young man questions how a divine beast can obey his orders. Bleda explains that making an enemy kneel is simple. According to him, you just have to take what is most precious, as he holds a cub. The legendary divine beast was reduced to this state after its cub was captured, because what should be protected becomes a weakness. Attila asks if he's finished saying his last words. Bleda retorts, questioning if those are the young man's final words. He then points and orders the calamity of the forest to attack. Attila immediately prepares for combat. The creature advances and attacks with its paw. He parries the blow using the axe's handle. In that instant, he realizes the situation is extremely unfavorable. He understands that if he takes a direct hit, he'll be crushed. The beast attacks again, and Attila is thrown back by the impact. Still, he manages to land, though he's dragged by the force of the attack. The young man notes the speed of that massive body, hard as rock and impenetrable to ordinary blades. As the creature approaches, he considers what to do. Then he remembers that while you can't cut a rock, you can still drive something into it. If the blade won't cut, then the solution is to embed it. With this in mind, he readies an axe and positions it. Then, he uses the second axe to strike the first with all his might. The impact buries the blade deep in the creature's body. The divine beast reacts to the blow that hits its shoulder. Attila prepares to attack again. The creature stares at him intently. He lands a direct blow on the beast's paw. Right after, he spins his body to build momentum. Then, he leaps into the air for a powerful attack. The axe strikes the creature's shoulder with full force. The blade cuts deep into the beast's hide. One of the men realizes he's using one axe to drive in the other. After multiple hits to its arm, the creature finally collapses completely. The calamity of the forest approaches its cub, which is lying on the ground. Bleda calls it a useless bear. Then, he orders his men to fire their arrows. The archers draw their bows and take aim. A shower of arrows flies toward Attila. He prepares to deflect the projectiles. With his axe, he deflects all the arrows coming his way. One of the men calls him a monster. With his head severed, the same man screams for his companions to flee. Attila charges at Bleda's men, attacking them without hesitation. Soon after, he lands the final blow on the last opponent, and so he defeats all of Bleda's men using only his axes. He then turns to Bleda and challenges him to a fight between the two of them. Finally, Bleda accepts the challenge and calls him to battle. Bleda leaps toward Attila, initiating the attack. Some men comment that the two are just staring at each other, not even moving. However, one of them corrects him, stating that the battle may have already begun without them noticing. Thus begins the confrontation that will decide the fate of the Black Wolf tribe. Attila remains firm in his fighting stance. On the other side, Bleda also stays still, holding his axe securely. Suddenly, he takes a step forward. In an instant, he vanishes, leaving Attila confused by the sudden disappearance. He then reappears behind him to attack. Without stopping, he launches another attack that cuts Attila's shoulder. Surprised, he questions what kind of move that was. Bleda charges again, and Attila realizes he can't dodge in time. Then, he taunts him, asking if he really thought he could win with brute force alone, calling him a fool. He then claims to be used to dealing with clumsy attacks based only on strength. Attila defends himself as best he can, and acknowledges his opponent's skill. The sequence of blows pushes him back. He can't find any opening, not even to swing his axe. Bleda praises him for managing to defend against his barrage of high-speed attacks. Still, he prepares for his next move. With a burst of speed, he rushes forward again. Attila reacts to the sudden movement. At that moment, Bleda declares that he will be the winner. Leaping over him, he lands a precise strike. In technique and experience, Bleda clearly surpasses him. Even so, Attila prepares for a counterattack. He remembers that this blow was nothing compared to Munzuk's. Seizing a perfect opening, he decides to attack. With precision, he hits Bleda with the handle of his axe. The blow lands squarely, making him spit blood. Some men start to celebrate, shouting that Attila has won. He remains standing, apparently victorious. Lying on the ground, Bleda begins to laugh. Attila asks what's so funny. Between laughs, he replies that it was about time for the effect to kick in, leaving him confused. Then he reveals that his axe was completely coated with berserker poison. He then asks if Attila knows what happens when someone is cut by that weapon. Furious, Attila calls him a bastard. Bleda points at him and declares that Attila himself will be the one to destroy the Black Wolf tribe. The young man looks at his own hand, confused about what's happening. He feels something strange coursing through his body. Soon after, he starts screaming as an energy completely envelops him. Bleda shouts for him to turn into a beast and die a miserable death. Attila feels his body growing intensely hot. Confused, he questions what is happening. In that instant, the divine beast kneels before him and calls him Attila, the one who inherits the soul of greed. Surprised, he asks if the divine beast can speak. It explains that he can now hear its voice clearly because he is closer to being a beast than a human. The creature then opens its mouth and tells him to receive this. Attila watches as a dagger materializes in his hand. The divine beast explains that this is the divine sword of the great martial king, granted to the one who defeats it, named Mihyul. It states the weapon will help his awakening when the soul of the Black Wolf tribe resonates, encouraging him to fight. Finally, it orders him to fight for those he must protect. An information window appears, describing the properties of the weapon called Mihyul. The smoke around Attila slowly dissipates as he faces Bleda. The men watch, unable to understand what's happening. Bleda wonders why his opponent isn't moving. In response, Attila simply says his name. Then he declares it's time to settle this fight. In the blink of an eye, Attila lunges forward and vanishes from sight. Before Bleda can react, a cut appears on his face. After the strike, Attila lands nimbly on the ground. Then, Bleda is struck again, screaming that it's impossible. The dagger is lodged in his shoulder. He stares at the blade embedded in his own body. Recognizing the weapon, he questions if it's the Mihyul. Without giving him time to react, Attila delivers the final blow. The impact hurls Bleda backward. He falls face down, defeated in a pool of his own blood. There, he finally understands that Attila was recognized by the divine beast, unlike him. The world has always been unfair, and he was born the brother of a talented man. Because of this, he lived his life constantly compared to Munzuk. Still, he was driven by the desire to catch up to the brother he so revered. He wanted to master the madness that made him spit blood. However, during one battle, everything took a different turn. Munzuk, the strongest warrior of the Black Wolves, was decimating enemies without pause. Bleda would scold him for charging in alone, but his brother would just apologize for getting too carried away. Then, he'd complain upon seeing him face everyone alone again. Even so, Munzuk kept fighting in the center of the battlefield. Suddenly, Bleda spots a new enemy approaching. Desperate, he runs, shouting his brother's name. An adversary prepares to strike Munzuk from behind. Bleda ends up getting hit in the face as Munzuk screams his name. Wounded while protecting him during the war, he kneels before his brother and questions him. Bleda confronts him, asking why he can't join the next battle, despite contributing so much. Munzuk just apologizes. He explains that with his injured eyes, Bleda can no longer fight on the battlefield. Instead of recognition, his place was taken from him. A messenger announces a new invasion, and Munzuk prepares to leave. In that moment, Bleda realizes he was the only one who believed they were fighting together. He screams that his brother would never understand his pain and suffering, and insists he's not the villain. In his mind, Munzuk, who abandoned him, and the Black Wolf tribe are the real culprits. Driven by this, He stands up and vows to destroy everything. He charges forward, yelling for no one to stand in his way. Attila faces him and orders him to stop saying whatever he pleases. He then demands that Blida take responsibility for his own actions. Preparing to advance, Attila declares he won't let someone like him get away with it. Finally, he states that he won't let Blida hurt his family or his comrades again. Then, he leaps toward him, shouting that he won't let him hurt anyone. The two lock eyes as they charge at each other. Blida and Attila clash in midair in a powerful confrontation. Attila delivers the final blow, striking him head-on. In that instant, he recognizes that deep down, everything had been a kindness to him. Still, his only wish was that his brother had told him they would fight together. Blida recalls the times they fought side by side, just like before. The men watching from a distance realize the fight has come to an end. The battle ends with Blida's death, and peace returns to the village. Afterward, he decides to leave, determined to reach the fairy realm. Attila says his goodbyes, stating that he's leaving now. One of the men questions his decision, while another laments they would be safe forever if he became the next chief. Munzuk, however, states that unfortunately, Attila cannot take on that role. The villagers protest, saying that's not true and that he would do an excellent job. Munzuk then says he will show them why. Confused, the men watch as he readies his weapon. Suddenly, Munzuk attacks with his axe. Surprised by the unexpected attack, Attila reacts quickly. He manages to block his own father's blow. Confused, he asks what he's doing. Munzuk praises him, saying his defense was splendid. Still, he points out that his stance is weak and full of openings. Attila remains silent, not understanding the situation. Munzuk states that he clearly possesses a special power. He then says the sword entrusted to him is proof that a great destiny awaits. Munzuk explains that people's souls are tested when they face despair, and that Bleda lost the light in his own soul. So, he advises him to temper his mind, technique, body, and soul, like steel, forged 100 times. Finally, he instructs him to never lose the light of his soul, no matter what happens. Attila calls out to his father and agrees with his words. Munzuk then asks his son to return immediately. At that moment, a woman named Eriku appears in his path. She approaches, saying that this is a promise. Suddenly, she places something around his neck, surprising him. Eriku hugs him as she fastens the amulet. The object is made from the fang of the divine beast. She states that it will surely protect him. Attila thanks her, moved. Munzuk runs to him and holds him, begging him not to go. Already in the distance, Attila bids farewell to his people, who watch him from the village gate. Later, he sets up camp alone in the dark forest. Sitting by the fire, he remarks that the meat is roasting nicely. He picks up the hot piece and says it looks delicious. Then, he prepares to take the first bite. However, he stops when he hears a sound from the forest. He turns and stares into the darkness between the trees. Attila then asks how long they're going to keep following him. At that moment, the small cub of the divine beast emerges from the darkness. Attila turns to the darkness and asks how long they have been following him. The small cub of the divine beast timidly appears from behind a tree. Calmly, he just asks the creature to go home. The cub sits on the ground, while Attila watches it in silence. Then, he explains that he can't take it with him, and asks it to be a good boy and return to its nest. Just then, the little creature's stomach rumbles, and its eyes turn to the meat in his hand. Seeing this, Attila gives in and offers the food, telling it to eat, and then leave. The cub bites the meat and refuses to let go, getting swung from side to side. Soon after, the creature falls fast asleep, hugging the piece of meat. Attila realizes the cub took his whole piece. He calls it a savage, despite its cute appearance, and decides to leave it behind. As he turns, however, he stops suddenly when he notices something strange and asks what that is. The cub spits out an object, making Attila cry out in surprise. He asks the creature not to scare him like that, as it offers him a twig. Confused, Attila asks if it's a gift, and then yells that he doesn't need it. Even so, the little cub nestles in his lap, making him wonder why it's so attached. He then wonders if the creature smells its mother on him. It was the same cub Bleda had used as a hostage. The divine beast fought with its own life to protect it. That's why Attila didn't want to take it on such a dangerous journey. He stares at the cub sleeping in his lap, and considers the situation a huge problem. Suddenly, the little creature lies down next to the sword. At that moment, he remembers that the cub is also a guardian beast, bound to the protection of the weapon. The sun rises, heralding a new day. The little creature sits up and looks around. Then, it realizes Attila is no longer there. Frightened, it runs in the direction he went. After a few steps, it stops suddenly, looking lost. Soon after, the cub starts to cry. Attila appears holding the sword and asks if that's what it was looking for. He explains that he can't give it to the cub, but instead, he tears off a piece of his own bandage. He then ties the cloth around the cub's neck. Attila says that it's a gift. Then, he turns to leave and calls for it to come with him. Before leaving, He warns that he'll leave it behind if it doesn't follow. The cub runs and rubs against his leg. Soon after, it starts to follow him happily down the path. Attila warns that the next meal won't be until they reach the next village. Then, he encourages it to run. The two of them travel together along a mountain trail. From a distance, a woman watches their journey through an orb and remarks that the scene is interesting. She describes him as a wild and resilient warrior, capable of breaking a magical poison needle. The witch Batri. Elizabeth wonders where someone so exceptional has been hiding. Finally, she states that she is now quite interested in him. Attila announces they've arrived. Before him stands the first city of their journey. They enter a tavern, where the little creature immediately starts eating, perched on a stool. Attila warns it not to eat that, his voice filled with concern. Just then, the tavern keeper brings out a huge special dish, apologizing for the delay. A large portion of steamed buns is placed on the table. Attila grabs a bun, takes a bite, and asks the man if he knows of the fairy kingdom. The tavern keeper replies he's never heard of it, and Attila says he expected as much. The fairy sanctuary is a floating island, adrift in the North Sea of the Kurielsh Rudra continent. He takes a sip and remarks that it was something he only wrote in his novel. He then comments that he should have detailed it better. The tavern keeper is surprised that he's already finished his food. Attila knows that to reach the North Sea, he must pass through a specific place. Lands filled with monsters, like giants and dragons, await him on his path. On top of that, he'll also have to face the sinister creatures living beyond those regions. Thinking about all this, he puts a hand to his head, complaining of a sudden pain. At another table, a man repeats the question about the fairy kingdom. Right after, he and his friends start laughing, as one of them asks Attila's age. One of the men stands up and yells that there's no such thing as a fairy kingdom. In a mocking tone, he tells Attila to stop dreaming and face reality. Attila coldly replies that it's none of his business. He then stands and orders the man to leave at once. The drunk threatens him, saying if he doesn't hurry up, he'll turn the little creature into stew. In response, the creature bites his finger hard. Attila just tells them not to worry, saying he's just some drunk. Suddenly, another man kicks the table, sending the drunk flying. Attila and the tavern keeper turn their gaze to the newcomer. Otto, leader of the Kiri mercenary group, remarks that drinks lose their taste when certain people are around. The tavern keeper looks terrified by his presence. He then warns Attila that it would be best to leave quickly. Confused, Attila wonders why that knight is so rude. Then, the tavern keeper reveals that he is Otto, known as the Ogre Blade. Attila smiles upon hearing he's an outlaw who used to be a knight. Otto replies dryly that he doesn't owe anyone an explanation. At that moment, the men who were with the drunk rush to attack Attila. His gaze fixes on the approaching opponents. In the blink of an eye, they are all thrown to the ground around him. Otto is shocked by what just happened. Seeing his companions defeated, he asks who Attila is. With a smile, Attila answers that he is the original author. He then rips his own shirt and says, it's his turn now. Otto panics and asks him to wait a moment. The men kneel on the floor and begin to apologize. Attila backs away, stating it was all just self-defense. Trying to justify himself, he says he had no choice, as he was attacked first. Just then, the tavern keeper grabs his hands and thanks him, leaving him confused. Attila picks up a wanted poster and asks if those men are criminals. The tavern keeper confirms, explaining the Lord issued a warrant against them, and the whole town had suffered from their deeds. He then wonders why the order demanded they be captured alive. The man then speculates that perhaps the goal was to recruit them for the war. He mentions hearing rumors of an imminent conflict, and that the local army has fewer soldiers than the opposing side. For that reason, Baron Bertrand is gathering anyone available as military force, even criminals. Attila smiles hearing this and says it's good news. A short time later, they arrive at the local lord's mansion. Inside the hall, a man asks if Attila was the one who captured the bandits in exchange for a war horse. The nobleman who receives them introduces himself as Lord Bertrand. Kneeling, the young man confirms that it's true. He adds that he also came to receive the cash reward for the group's capture. Lord Bertrand scolds him for speaking as if a war were about to break out in Gascony. Attila, however, calmly replies that he is simply preparing for war. At this, the Lord demands to know where he heard such information. Attila reveals he heard rumors about the lack of soldiers, and concludes they are all being gathered for a confrontation against the Akites in the east. He then states that this is the reason there are no bandits or a watch corps in the village. The nobleman is momentarily speechless at the deduction. Attila continues, saying the Lord wanted them captured alive because he believed they would be useful on the battlefield. Bertrand praises his insight. The young man returns the compliment, claiming that among the barbarians, the name Hound of the Southern Mountain is synonymous with terror, capable of causing fear and tears. Visibly flattered, Lord Bertrand remarks that even the barbarians know of him. At that moment, Attila admits that it was a lie, but adds that it would be an honor to serve him and receive a reward. Bertrand reflects for a moment and agrees that capturing the entire Kiri mercenary group deserves recognition. So, he offers 10 gold coins and a warhorse of his choice, receiving immediate thanks. However, the nobleman adds that there is one condition. Extending his hand, he says that if Attila truly wishes to serve him, he must join the war alongside Gascogneux's army. Otto and his men are shocked by the proposal. Attila, on the other hand, accepts without hesitation, stating he was expecting those very words. The decision to join the war was made for a single reason. It was necessary to make that man move. That man was Charles Einhard. He was the protagonist of the story, known among his enemies as the God of Death, and only he knew the Fairy King. In the fortress courtyard, war preparations continue at a steady pace. Behind the bars, Otto talks to Attila, while the other prisoners watch in silence. Suddenly, he screams in desperation, begging Attila to get them out of there. Attila calmly replies that he's too loud and tells him to stop calling him boss, since he's only 16. The revelation about his age leaves Otto completely confused. When he asks if the correct age isn't 46, he's threatened, which makes him apologize immediately. Otto argues that if they don't join the battle, they will all be executed. Attila, however, claims that won't happen. He just tells them to join the fight quietly, and they will be saved. The mercenary leader falls silent for a moment, staring through the bars. Then, he proposes they settle everything in a one-on-one duel. Attila is confused by the proposal of a single combat. A joust is a direct duel. It's a confrontation between two knights, with everything on the line. The rules may vary, but one is always the same. The strongest wins, regardless of status. The winner takes all, while the loser loses everything. Otto reveals he was once a knight, and that, although he can't win in a brute force fight, he'd have a chance fighting on horseback with a lance. In the original story, he was just a minor character who would die without even being named by Duke Gascony's army. Attila's arrival in this world is starting to change the story, and it would be problematic if Otto died now. So, to drag the Kiri mercenary group into the war, Attila decides to accept the proposal. He declares that if he wins, they will all join the war. If Otto wins, he will free them according to his terms with Bertrand. With a calm smile, Attila accepts the challenge. The mercenaries shout to their captain, saying they're putting their lives in his hands. Otto faces the situation seriously, while Attila remains calm. 10 days later, on the day of the joust, the two knights take their positions in the arena. A herald welcomes the lords, ladies, and guests in attendance. The crowd in the stands celebrates the start of the event. Lord Bertrand watches everything intently from his position. The herald announces that the battle will be for all the stakes and asks for a great round of applause. He then explains that everyone knows the rules, as the knights ready their lances. They must charge furiously at one another. The two face each other from opposite sides of the arena. The only rule is to attack only with their lances. The one who knocks their opponent off their horse will be the winner. For these proud knights, social status holds no value. It's a fight where only the strong win and take all. The herald turns to the excited crowd. Then, he announces that the duel is about to begin. With a solemn gesture, he signals for the combatants to enter. Otto, known as the Demon Sword, enters the arena on his horse. Some men in the crowd shout for his death. A woman sitting nearby comments that he seems to be quite hated. One of the men turns to answer, but is taken aback. The hooded woman simply puts a finger to her lips, asking for silence. The witch, Bathory Erzsébet, remarks that she doesn't care, as she only came to see little Attila. The men who were shouting before are now completely enchanted by her. Next, the herald announces the next competitor coming from the west. He introduces Attila, the barbarian warrior of unknown strength who single-handedly captured the entire Kiri mercenary group. The imprisoned mercenaries shout for their captain to win, as their lives depend on it. Otto hears the shouts of support and is visibly embarrassed. From the other side of the arena, Attila just calls out his name. He then comments that the armor doesn't look too bad on him. Otto replies that he can only afford to be arrogant for now. The herald announces that the long-awaited moment has finally arrived. He introduces Attila, from the Black Wolf tribe, fighting against Otto, the Demon Sword. Finally, the herald begins the duel. The herald thanks the audience for their patience. He then presents the duel between Otto, the Demon Sword, and the barbarian warrior, Attila. With the wave of a flag, the match finally begins. Otto charges forward with his lance at the ready. At the same time, Attila heads toward his opponent. With his eyes fixed on the target, Otto believes he can win. A moment later, he launches his attack with the lance. Attila leans over his horse, watching the tip of the lance draw dangerously close to his face. Otto is completely shocked by his opponent's action. The mercenaries in the stands wonder if he really caught the lance with his bare hands. Calmly, Attila says he's just going to return the attack. A lance mastery skill is activated. He then spins the weapon and thrusts it back toward Otto. Otto sees the tip of the lance advancing quickly. Then Attila strikes him with the other end of the weapon. The impact makes Otto spit blood. He doubles over on his horse from the force of the blow. Bathory Elizabeth smiles as she watches the duel. She comments that he's truly an insane warrior, a real berserker. Attila breaks the lance, and the herald announces that the warrior from the Black Wolf tribe has won the first round. Soon after, they both prepare for the second round. Now, Otto wields a large warhammer. He realizes the situation is not in his favor. The herald announces the start of the second round. Attila charges forward on his mount, crossing the arena. He decides he'll end it all by knocking his opponent off his horse. With this in mind, he accelerates at high speed toward Otto. His opponent also rides into the confrontation. The mercenaries shout their captain's name. The warhammer is thrown, spinning through the air. Otto watches the weapon approach. At that moment, Bathory snaps her fingers. She smiles, raising her index finger. Suddenly, a force erupts from the arena floor. Attila and Otto are caught by surprise by the disturbance. Attila's horse rears up. Startled, he turns and looks toward the stands, searching for the source of the event. Then he fixes his gaze on Bathory Elizabeth. She just stares back at him without saying a word. The mercenaries and the small creature shout that the horse is out of control. Otto believes he's been saved and sees his chance. Attila throws away what's left of the lance. Otto realizes the blow failed, but believes he can still try again. At that moment, Attila has an unexpected idea. He simply leaps from his horse toward his opponent. Otto is completely confused by the action. Attila lands on the enemy horse right behind him. He then grabs him by the neck. The herald shouts, surprised that he jumped onto his opponent's mount. He questions if that is allowed by the rules of the joust. Lord Bertrand just watches the scene with a slight smile. Attila declares that with this, the second round is his. The horse continues to run uncontrollably across the arena and rears up with both of them on its back. Annoyed that the situation is repeating itself, Attila keeps Otto immobilized. Then, with a jolt, the horse throws them off, and he lands on his feet. Otto, on the other hand, falls hard onto the arena floor. His men and the small creature scream, realizing the situation is serious. Attila's horse charges uncontrollably toward the fallen Otto. Bathory Elizabeth watches the scene unfold intently. Meanwhile, Attila positions himself near his opponent. With a single word, he orders her to stop. Otto's horse gets spooked and bolts away from Attila. In the audience, everyone watches the scene in silence, including Bathory Elizabeth, who observes from a distance. Attila drives his great sword into the ground, next to the remains of his opponent's weapon. Otto, the demon sword, remains kneeling before him. Then, Attila extends his hand and asks if this is round 3. Otto stares at him for a moment before answering. He accepts the help to get up and says they can continue. The herald of the joust announces that the time has come for the final decisive round between the two knights. Bathory Elizabeth remarks that he noticed her little trick, finding it amusing. Before the packed arena, the herald thanks everyone for their patience during the small incident. He then announces that from this moment on, the fight will be on foot. With the combatants in position, he declares there are no rules and any weapon is allowed. With a simple hand gesture, the signal for the final battle is given. Attila lunges forward and attacks, but Otto manages to dodge. In response, he unleashes a powerful blow with his weapon. Otto assesses that his opponent's attacks are heavy, each blow carrying massive force. Bracing himself, he concludes he just needs to dodge the first attack. Attila then leaps into the air to deliver a decisive strike. Otto dodges, and the weapon slams violently into the ground. Seeing an opening, he declares that victory is his. Attila calls him naive and spins his body, keeping a firm grip on his weapon. The blow strikes Otto's face with the flat of the blade. The impact sends him flying backward, making him realize his opponent isn't human. Attila approaches as Otto remains on the ground. In the crowd, some men shout for their captain, but they are quickly told to shut up. Then, voices echo through the arena, pleading for the fight to stop. Otto staggers to his feet, covered in blood and holding his broken sword. One of the men shouts for him to stop, saying that this is enough. Another begs, saying he'll do anything to save his life, even join the war. He insists that Otto can't die in a place like this. Turning to his comrades, Otto remarks that even with their hands tied, they still talk too much. Still, He admits he would say the same in their situation. The sword falls from his hand and hits the ground. Then, the herald of the joust announces that Otto can no longer continue. With a white flag raised, he declares Attila the winner. Otto loses consciousness and collapses forward. Attila catches him before he hits the ground. He says that Otto is no longer just a nobody. He then acknowledges him as a warrior worthy of respect. The crowd erupts in celebration, while Lord Bertrand watches intently beside his guards. From afar, Bathory watches everything with a faint smile. The small white creature runs across the arena floor. As the sun sets, the mercenaries lift Attila onto their shoulders in celebration. That night, it's revealed that, at his request, the mercenaries have officially joined Bertrand's army. In a tavern, everyone toasts to the new beginning of the Kiri Mercenary Corps. Otto shouts that tonight, everything is on the boss, and everyone should eat up and be grateful. One of the men calls for more food, and the tavern keeper readily agrees. Attila, holding the small creature, remarks on how quickly everyone recovered. Otto declares that a true swordsman accepts defeat and shows loyalty, but he's forbidden from drinking. He complains that he hasn't had a single drop since he left his cell. His men hold him back as he tries to reach for a mug. 2 weeks later, Attila is eating a skewer and notices that Otto has recovered well. The tavern keeper approaches to greet him and mentions he heard about their participation in the war, saying he's sure they'll do great things. Attila asks where he heard that. The man replies that one of the mercenaries mentioned it and warns that the drinks are running low. Then Attila orders him not to move. Confused, the tavern keeper asks what's gotten into him as Attila gets up from the table. He states that this man is not the real owner of the place. The tavern keeper questions what he means by that. Attila explains that he has no scent, like a doll. He then adds that this is strange for someone who was cooking and serving everyone. Finally, Attila asks who or what he really is. The tavern keeper's body begins to transform before Attila's eyes. Otto immediately rushes over, and Attila asks who he really is. Then, the masked figure comments that he must be quite skilled to see through his disguise. He then states that knowing his true identity means nothing. The man brandishes his weapon and says that either way, Attila is going to the next world. He attacks, but Attila dodges the blow. The blade hits the chandelier, extinguishing the tavern's lights. Attila remains alert in the sudden darkness. Otto yells that it's completely dark, but Attila tells him to calm down. He replies that there's no way to be calm in the dark with an assassin on the loose. Just then, the enemy appears behind Otto and tries to attack him. At the last second, Attila pulls him out of the blow's reach. He then tells his companion to be quiet and stay in the corner. Then he turns to the enemy and calls him an assassin who specializes in disguises. Attila states he can identify him by his physique and strength, revealing him to be Rashid, a second-rate assassin. The masked man just stares at him, taking a combat stance. After a moment, Attila asks if he isn't correct. Rashid vanishes from his sight in an instant. However, Attila intercepts him from behind, pressing a blade to his neck, and demands to know where he heard that. He promises to kill him painlessly if he answers honestly. The alternative, he says, is to have his skin peeled off slowly, in agony. Rashid questions if he could really do that with just the hilt of his sword. The assassin tries to move in for an attack, but he stops mid-motion. A projectile is thrown, and Attila quickly dodges to the side. The blade strikes the enemy's face, splitting the mask in two. As the broken disguise falls to the floor, Rashid backs away. Now with his face exposed, he asks how Attila managed to read his movements in the dark. Attila simply replies that it was by the smell of hashish. Rashid repeats the words, incredulous. Then, Attila reveals that the scent is ingrained, however faintly, in his hidden weapons. The assassin asks if all his movements were read just by the scent. He then falls to his knees and admits defeat. Rashid then prepares to take his own life with his blade. Before he can, a hand reaches out and stops him. Attila stops him and asks about Kasup. Surprised, Rashid demands to know why he knows his son's name. Attila simply replies that he can't explain. The narration reveals that Kasup is Rashid's beloved son, and that, in the future, he will become a powerful ally of Charles. Desperate, Rashid begs them not to touch the child, saying he'll do anything. Then, Attila states there is only one condition. The assassin asks what it is. He orders Rashid to become his dog. Attila tells him not to worry and to just do as he's told. Without hesitation, the assassin kneels, stating that a warrior's contract is absolute. He says he will contact him later. Then, Rashid starts barking. Attila tells him to stop, saying he doesn't have to take it so literally. Otto and his men are startled by the sudden noise. From a distance, Bathory Elizabeth watches the scene and wonders what they are doing. She questions if this is some kind of ritual dedicated to an unknown god. However, she sets the question aside, curious and eager for what's to come with her new allies. Spring comes to an end. Everyone undergoes intense training. On a summer day, In the south of the continent, the cavalry advances. A city appears in flames during a violent attack. The war had begun, and the arrival of knights in full armor is announced. They are identified as the Golden Lion Mercenary Group, led by Charles Einhard. A group of lancers marches in formation. War banners rise across the battlefield. The cavalry charges forward at high speed. A commander shouts orders demanding his men eliminate all the Gasconian cowards. Right after, another soldier roars for them to show the strength of the Aquitanians. He orders them to kill everyone, but his head is sliced clean off in that instant. His men scream the name of their fallen commander. At that moment, they spot an axe flying toward them. The weapon slams into the ground as a lone figure charges forward on horseback. The soldiers wonder if the Gasconian army is attacking in full force. However, one of them realizes it's just a single person attacking alone. Attila desperately tries to rein in his stubborn horse. Even so, the animal plows into the enemy ranks, knocking down several soldiers. Amid the chaos, he spins and strikes with his weapon. Attila remarks that this wasn't exactly the plan, but there's no other choice now. He strikes an enemy knight, lamenting that he didn't want to draw so much attention. One of the soldiers calls him a demon, shouting that he's not human. Seeing this, the commander orders a full retreat. The soldiers begin to flee on horseback. Attila, however, has no intention of letting them escape. He grabs a bundle of spears from the ground. He then prepares to hurl them. The skill, spear throw, is activated. The weapons fly toward the fleeing enemies. One of the soldiers' horses is hit first. Moments later, the men are pierced by the spears. Riders and their mounts fall to the ground together. Attila charges forward on his horse, shouting, "Attack!" His men follow, urging him not to advance alone. Otto then realizes the fight has already started. His enemies recognize him as Otto, the ogre blade of the Kiri mercenary group. With that, they conclude that the executioner, Attila, must also be present. Under Attila's command, the Kiri mercenary group advances swiftly, each member playing their part. They prepare for the coming battle against that man. Meanwhile, elsewhere, an investiture ceremony is taking place at the cathedral. Count Accolé de Accoulé receives his title. Charles Einhard is knighted. He is tasked with protecting the people and acting as their defender. The ladies in attendance comment on his appearance. They remark with admiration that he is only 18 years old. Two nobles, however, cannot accept that a commoner has become a knight and begin to criticize his humble origins. One of them suggests Charles is nothing more than a human sacrifice, meant to serve as a shield for the true lords. Just then, someone taps the noble on the shoulder. A muscular man approaches and comments that speaking ill of others is not a good idea. Ruach, captain of the special attack unit, adds that speaking ill of Charles is even worse. Outraged, the noble demands to know who he is, stating that he's a baron. Another man quickly steps in and apologizes to Baron Ruach for his companion's disrespect. He introduces himself as Pippin, vice captain of the Golden Lion Mercenary Group. The baron ignores the introduction and asks how Pippin knows who he is. Pippin calmly replies that everyone attending the ceremony has been identified. Shocked, the noble asks if they really memorized all 800 guests. He then concludes it must be a bluff, typical of low-born folk. Pippin apologizes for the disturbance and turns to leave. However, the baron stops him, asking if commoners can offend a noble and simply walk away. With all due respect, Pippin explains that Ruach only warned him against insulting Charles. He adds that insulting a knight without cause is illegal. He then states that the baron himself will not go unpunished. The noble calls him a nuisance and tells him to get lost. Pippin excuses himself and takes his leave. Later that night, he pauses while walking through the woods. Noticing an insect land on his arm, he comments on the creature's incredible speed. Charles asks what's on his mind, and Pippin replies that the ceremony is over and they'll be heading to battle tomorrow. Charles advises him to just let the do-nothing fools talk. He declares that he will conquer the nation and won't let anyone disrespect him or his comrades. Pippin agrees, saying that's a promise. Charles confirms the commitment with a fist bump. Then, Pippin mentions that he has received intel about an extremely strong mercenary in Gascogne. He explains that the man seems to have power comparable to Charles Einhard himself. Charles questions if the mercenary is really that strong. With a confident smile, he says he can't wait to meet him on the battlefield. Otto asks Attila if he can see the dungeon in the sky. The young barbarian doesn't seem to understand the question, so Otto explains that it's because Attila had a perfect grasp of the enemy camp and their troop strength, but Attila denies having any such ability. As his men celebrate, Otto claims this means the heavens are on their side. Attila, however, silently reflects on the faith of a former bandit. When called Sir Former Knight, He replies that he never held any noble title. Attila then states that obviously the heavens are not on their side. He simply understands the flow of the battlefield, and he must act without altering the original course so that Charles can find the fairy realm safely. Suddenly, the sky darkens, leaving Otto stunned by the abrupt change. Attila looks up and wonders if it's some kind of omen. An eclipse begins to form in the sky. He watches the phenomenon and comments that he didn't write a scene like this in the original work. Rashid kneels and reports that the Golden Lion mercenary group will divide its forces in two within 5 days. Attila realizes that Charles has finally started to move. He says he understands and tells Rashid to continue the good work. The Gasconian army should have joined the war, but Bleda was defeated. Because of that, Gascogneu's military strength became completely insufficient. If things continue this way, the battle will end before Charles discovers the fairy realm. Attila calls out to Otto, who asks if he needs anything. Unwilling to let the story he created become any more distorted, he announces they will attack the Golden Lion mercenary group. Otto asks for a moment, questioning if he heard the target correctly, and Attila confirms. The mercenary warns that rumors say the group has over 100 men, but the young barbarian replies that he already knows. Otto grabs him and warns that their leader Charles is dangerous and as strong as he is. In response, Attila simply asks if he isn't going to join. Otto confirms he will, and is told to get ready. He argues that preparations would take at least 10 days to gather armor, food, and weapons. He also points out that the mercenaries still need more training. Even so, Attila orders them to depart immediately. Confused, Otto asks what exactly immediately means. With a smile, Attila clarifies that the 3 former knights, along with himself and Otto, will leave right now. 5 days later, a battle is raging on the southern front. Pippin and his soldiers react in shock to what they see on the battlefield. He claims he hadn't heard anything about this. A man announces that the Black Wolf tribe has arrived to reinforce Gascogneux as they advance over the fallen knights. Pippin prepares with his remaining soldiers to face the approaching warriors. One of the barbarians attacks and strikes down a knight. The same warrior then charges forward and defeats another soldier. At the end of the confrontation, Pippin and his comrades are lying on the ground, later in the tent of the Golden Lion mercenary group's camp. Charles informs his men that the Black Wolf tribe appeared on the southern front today. One of the knights questions if that warrior tribe has really allied with Gascogneux. He confirms, explaining that they are rapidly expanding their influence with fierce momentum. Still, Charles sees this as an opportunity to achieve military distinction. He then announces that the first unit's destination has changed and orders immediate mobilization to the front line. His men, including Pippin and Ruach, respond promptly to the order. Pippin reports that the first unit is ready to depart. Charles thanks him and leaves the second unit under his command. He then turns to his men and orders the first unit to advance. Before leaving, he asks Pippin not to die. He replies not to mention things that won't happen. Ruach approaches and states that worrying about Pippin is unnecessary. Charles then orders Ruach to protect himself as well, and he replies that he's counting on his leader. With determination, Charles declares they will achieve distinction and rise in this country. His men, including Pippin and Ruach, show immediate support. 4 figures walk away into the darkness. Pippin turns to his soldiers and calls for them to set out in search of the enemy commanders' heads. As they prepare to leave, he notices a sudden movement. Attila leaps from the forest toward 2 knights. Brandishing his weapon, he announces that he has finally found them. Pippin moves quickly to intercept Attila's blow. The scene flashes back to 5 days ago during the eclipse. Otto questions if it's really possible to attack the Golden Lion with just 5 knights. Attila, however, just tells him to hurry up and get ready. While sharpening his blade, he explains that the only way to change the course of the war is to reduce the Golden Lion's military strength. He adds that this is their only chance, taking advantage of Charles's absence. Back in the present, Attila's surprise attack hits Pippin. The vice captain is thrown backward by the force of the impact. Attila then tells him to just behave. The knights of the second unit immediately surround him. Hidden among the bushes, Otto and his men grow worried and suggest intervening. He stops them, stating that the plan would be ruined if they abandoned their positions, leaving the others confused. Otto then clarifies that the strategy is to watch Attila defeat the enemy soldiers by himself. Attila comments that the original plan was just to attack Pippin and retreat. However, he realizes the situation won't be that simple. The knights advance toward him, and he prepares to fight. Attila leaps and spins his weapon in the air. With a single motion, he strikes several knights at once. 3 of them attack the spot where he was just moments before. Pippin notices the movement and warns of the attack from above. Attila braces himself and delivers a direct blow to the ground. The impact causes a massive explosion of earth. The shockwave spreads throughout the entire area. From his hiding spot, Otto comments that everything went exactly as planned. The dust begins to settle, revealing the bodies of knights being thrown through the air. Pippin is on the ground, his sword beside him. Ruach positions himself in front to protect him, and the vice captain realizes the gravity of the situation. The assault unit captain declares he will protect him, as he promised Charles. Pippin calls out Ruach's name. He turns and promises to protect him, just as he would protect the family he has learned to value. Happy memories with his comrades and Charles flash through his mind. He states that family is something worth defending as he raises his shield. Ruach prepares for combat. He focuses entirely on the approaching battle. Then, he declares himself the shield and faces Attila. Attila praises him, saying he's impressive. Ruach asks if he's the one they call the Man of the Massacre. The young barbarian replies that it seems he's starting to earn that title. He introduces himself as Ruach, captain of the assault unit. With resolve, he declares that he will defeat him. Attila just smiles in response. Ruach charges forward with a war cry. He leaps into the air and prepares his attack. However, Attila reacts first, jumping in for a devastating blow. He descends with his weapon ready, striking Ruach head-on. The captain of the assault unit tries to react to the impact. Pippin screams his comrade's name. Ruach is thrown backward, defeated. Attila turns and states that should be enough. Pippin recognizes him as the Man of the Massacre. He compares him to Charles in strength. However, he soon realizes he's even more powerful. Pippin understands that Attila will become a great obstacle for the Golden Lion. With that, he orders his men to form a defensive shield wall. The soldiers quickly organize into formation around him. Attila remarks that, as expected of Pippin, he can move 100 men with a single command. The soldiers' morale, which had been falling, instantly rises. The archers take their positions and prepare to attack. Then, Pippin orders them to fire. Pippin orders the garrison to form a shield wall. The soldiers unite in a defensive formation, combining spears and shields. From a distance, Otto and his men watch, wondering how dangerous that tactic could be. Attila immediately recognizes the formation as a phalanx. It's a strategy where soldiers overlap their shields and advance as a single body. Though simple, it allows everyone to defend themselves at the same time. It also enables coordinated attacks. This is the most effective tactic against unorganized enemies. Otto panics, warning that they're advancing toward them. Hearing this, the young barbarian yells for his men to raise their shields too. A system screen activates the support skill Tactic Detection. Attila warns that a rain of arrows is about to fall. The phalanx soldiers raise their shields above their heads. The arrows rain down on the formation, blocked by the compact defense. Attila stares at the shield wall that completely nullified the attack. Otto is surprised to see that, just as warned, the arrows really came. Then, he asks what those thicker approaching projectiles are. One of them hits the ground and explodes with force. Carrying his men on his back, Attila runs through the forest, telling them to hold on. He mentions he's already reduced the Golden Lion's forces and would like to retreat. However, with those bows, there's no opening to escape. He then tells his men to get down. They question him, thinking they're being abandoned. Attila denies it and simply tosses them carefully to the ground. After that, he turns around and says he'll stop them. Pippin orders his soldiers not to let him escape and to shoot to bring him down. A new volley of arrows is fired in his direction. Attila runs directly toward the projectiles. His men watch the scene and shout in alarm about the arrows. He spins his weapon in the air, deflecting all the shots. The arrows are batted away and sent flying. He then continues to advance, dodging each attack in the air. Pippin and the soldiers watch his advance in disbelief. The vice captain wonders how someone can deflect 100 arrows and still keep coming. He asks himself what kind of creature he's facing. Attila just smiles as he readies his weapon. With a shout, he throws the spinning axe. The projectile flies at high speed toward the phalanx. The weapon hits the first row of shields. It tears through soldiers and defenses as if there were no resistance. Then, the axe returns, spinning back toward Attila. Wounded, Pippin retreats, clutching his arm. He realizes the formation, perfected over so many years, was destroyed by a single throw. The surviving soldiers stare at Attila, now standing in the distance. The vice captain silently apologizes to Charles. Then, he falls to his knees, stating his journey ends here. Pippin bows his head, awaiting the final blow. However, Attila just comments that it was a fun fight. He then turns and starts to walk away. Pippin watches him leave and shouts in frustration. Otto comments that, seriously, he really thought he was going to die. Right after, he yells that the chief will have to carry them from now on. Attila asks what he's talking about. He then announces he's going to restart everyone's training from scratch, surprising the mercenary. A bird flies toward him and lands on his arm. With the bird on his shoulder, he takes a message and realizes it's from Rashid. Attila abruptly turns his horse, leaving his men behind. Otto asks where he's going. Without answering, He rides at high speed through the forest. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Charles faces Munzuk, who is about to start a great battle. The message said to go immediately to the Guyenne region, as Charles was heading to Chief Munzuk's location. Attila wonders why the Black Wolf tribe is on a battlefield. He doesn't remember writing a scene like that in the original story. A memory surfaces, showing Munzuk praising him as a son. Soon after, he recalls the tribe chief asking him to be happier. Attila screams as he continues to ride. He promises he will save him at any cost and asks him to just hold on. The scene then shifts to the Black Wolf tribe's camp. A violent attack is underway, splattering blood on the ground. Charles Einhard approaches a fallen warrior and demands that he answer. He then asks if he knows a barbarian warrior wielding a large axe. The man claims he doesn't know anyone with that description. Charles turns and comments that it's a shame, while holding his sword. The wounded warrior tells him to wait. Then Charles questions if he really just told him to wait. He declares that barbarians are enemies of Aquitaine. His soldiers readily agree. Charles continues, stating they launched a surprise attack and killed many of his comrades. The men support him again with shouts. With his sword raised, he claims he won't leave a single barbarian alive. A voice interrupts him, ordering him to wait. Charles turns and says he didn't expect him to come here. Chief Munzuk then reveals himself before him. The legendary warrior known as the Martial God positions himself for combat. Charles analyzes that an attack based solely on strength always requires preparation. He believes he has a good chance if he strikes the moment Munzuk raises his axe. However, the tribe chief hits him first, sending him flying. Munzuk continues the attack with a powerful blow. Charles blocks with his sword, noticing the opponent's absurd speed. Munzuk calls him an amateur for taking the blow from the side. He then charges forward with a punch. The impact hits the side of Charles's body. He is thrown back by the force of the blow. Munzuk advances again with the axe. The tribe chief is surprised to see Charles block his attacks twice. After landing, Charles gathers energy in his hands. Munzuk, however, notices his opponent's leg is unstable, so he leaps toward him. The knight looks up, facing the imminent attack. Munzuk calls him inexperienced and raises his axe for the final blow. The blade descends toward him. At that moment, multiple projectiles are fired at high speed. Charles hits Munzuk with the attack. The tribe chief is pierced in several parts of his body. Even so, he remains standing, reacting with surprise. Munzuk stares at the wounds on his chest and shoulder. Charles then raises his sword, preparing a new attack. Several level-up notifications appear in sequence. Finally, Charles declares that the more he fights, the stronger he becomes. Charles Einhard prepares to face Munzuk. The Black Wolf tribe's chief comments that the pressure from the sword has increased, finding the situation interesting. He then raises his axe and states that at least he won't be bored. Charles carefully watches his opponent's every move. Munzuk strikes the ground with full force. The resulting shockwave throws Charles backward. He recognizes the technique as a vacuum blade. Munzuk advances with a devastating side swing. Charles jumps over the attack, narrowly escaping its range. Munzuk praises his read on the blow, but pressures him with a new attack. Charles finds himself facing a triple attack coming his way. The blows hit the ground, destroying everything around. Munzuk is surprised to see that someone other than Awashira withstood that attack. Amidst the dust, a large sword is revealed. Charles Einhard emerges unscathed, holding his weapon firmly. The tribe chief can't believe all the blows were blocked. With a confident smile, Charles announces that it's his turn now. He then prepares for the counterattack. Charles raises his sword above his head and delivers a powerful downward strike. The attack hits Munzuk squarely. Charles Einhard remains standing as his opponent falls to the ground. He declares Munzuk's defeat and demands to know where the butcher is. The tribe chief responds only with a laugh. Charles questions the reason for that reaction. Fallen, Munzuk points and tells him to look behind him. Charles turns to see what's approaching. Attila then lands on the battlefield and states that he arrived just in time. He demands that Charles get away from his father. Charles immediately recognizes him as the butcher. Attila advances and orders him to get out of the way, or he'll be thrown aside. Charles, however, just challenges him to try. The two weapons clash in a single instant. The two warriors test their strength in a direct confrontation. The impact of the collision generates a massive shockwave. Charles's blade pushes Attila's axe back. Suddenly, Attila feels an intense pain in his head. A warning window appears, informing him that he has encountered the story's protagonist, Charles Einhard. Soon after, the notification announces the activation of the Author Protection Program. Attila is paralyzed as the system activates. Then, a second authority, called the Mind's Eye, is unlocked for him. An alert window announces that the Author's Protection Program is being activated. At the same time, a second authority called the Mind's Eye is unlocked. Attila wonders what exactly the mind's eye is. Without giving him time to think, Charles presses forward to continue the attack. He realizes this is no time to get distracted. He then aims directly for his opponent's shoulder. Attila is surprised by the sudden move. Still, he manages to dodge the blow at the last second. The knight is stunned by the unexpected dodge. With a slight smile, Attila shows he's impressed. He understands that this heightened perception is the effect of the mind's eye. A new window appears, displaying Charles's combat power as 500. Attila notes that this value is 100 points higher than in the original story. Shortly after, the number climbs to 503. He watches his adversary's power increase again. Faced with this, he begins to prepare based on the new information. Another system window reveals Attila's combat power is 800. With this, he concludes that prolonging the fight could become a problem. Charles Einhard rushes forward at high speed to attack. He then decides to exploit an opening in his opponent. Attila is surprised by the speed of the charge. He parries the blow and realizes the sword's speed is also increasing. Charles resolves to rip the weapon from his hands. So he attacks Attila's axe directly. Attila realizes the attack comes at the exact moment he formulates his moves. The knight maintains the offensive with an extremely precise strike. The blade grazes Attila's body. He quickly recovers and states that the fight isn't over yet. His eyes focus on finding a gap. Seizing the smallest opening, Attila counterattacks. Charles is caught off guard by the unexpected reaction. Attila intercepts the blade and grabs his adversary's wrist. He then twists his arm forcefully. With a swift move, he throws Charles over his shoulder. Attila prepares for the finishing blow. Then he unleashes a powerful kick straight to the knight's chest. The blow lands squarely. As he lands, he declares the fight is over. Charles's blood drips onto the ground. Even so, the knight gets up, wounded but still willing to fight. Attila reacts, realizing his opponent is still standing. A system window shows that Charles's combat power has reached 800. The number climbs to 810 shortly after. He realizes the value keeps rising without stopping. The power growth accelerates. Attila smiles, acknowledging the strength of the protagonist he himself created. Charles Einhard advances again, weapon in hand. His presence is now overwhelming. Attila watches him intently, knowing this man is special. The more they exchange blows and the more Attila avoids the attacks, the more Charles's power overflows. With a determined smile, he decides to go all out. He then leaps into the air for a decisive attack. However, a slash hits him directly in the chest. Even wounded, he vows he will defeat Charles. Charles then declares that he will follow the path of the Supreme King. He lunges forward with his most powerful attack. The blade cuts deep into Attila's chest and face. The impact of the final blow devastates the surrounding landscape. Charles Einhard watches the smoke slowly dissipate. Lying on the ground, Munzuk watches the scene in silence. Charles turns as he feels a different presence. A wave of energy violently shoves him back. He can't believe his opponent survived. However, Attila rises from amidst the rubble. With a firm smile, he faces Charles once more. The moment their eyes meet, Attila warns him that he's coming. Charles's instincts scream danger. Attila then slams his fist into the ground, raising a curtain of dust and debris. Surprised by the action, Charles looks up. Then, Attila kicks the knight's fallen sword toward him. The weapon hits the ground and causes a massive explosion. Amidst the smoke, Charles complains that he can't see anything. Attila appears behind him, ready to strike. The knight spins around quickly to defend himself. Attila delivers a two-fisted hammer blow. The impact lands squarely on Charles's chest. Advancing with another punch, Attila tells him to eat this and go to sleep. Charles twists his body to intercept the approaching attack. In the same motion, he grabs the pommel of the sword on the ground. He swiftly blocks Attila's fist. Attila reacts, surprised by the unexpected defense. Smiling, Charles asks if he's only just noticed. A system window reveals his attack power has reached 900, and Attila notes it's still climbing. Charles lunges with his sword, but Attila blocks the blow with his arms. The attack power rises to 901. Attila is pushed back by the force of the impact. The meter continues to rise, reaching 902. The two exchange a rapid and intense sequence of blows. Charles's power grows with no sign of stopping. The knight charges, yelling for his opponent to die. Attila is thrown back by the violent offensive. Even so, he clenches his fist, ready to fight back. Attila advances with a punch, determined to end the fight. His fist collides directly with the blade of Charles's sword. The impact cracks the weapon. With a shout, Attila unleashes his full power. The blow shatters the sword and sends Charles flying. The shockwave from the attack freezes the battlefield. Charles Einhard falls to the ground, unable to continue fighting. Attila remains standing, panting after his victory. The battlefield falls silent after the confrontation. He approaches Munzuk and asks if his father is all right. Munzuk says he is and tells him not to worry. Attila helps him up and receives a word of thanks. The tribe's chief comments on how much he has grown in the short time they were apart. Confused by the remark, Attila turns to face him. Munzuk explains that his eyes showed a madness during the fight. According to him, that was the look of a warrior who dominates combat. Finally, he concludes that his son has not slacked on his rigorous training. Attila questions what rigor he's talking about. He then remembers something, and Munzuk asks about the sudden pause. As they walk away, Charles calls him Butcher and tells him to wait. Attila turns to face the defeated knight. Charles asks to be finished off, saying that mercy at this point would be meaningless. He asks if his opponent will continue to get stronger and stronger. He then challenges him to grow even stronger so they can fight again. Bathory watches the projection and wonders why Attila is so strong. She speculates if he might be a servant of some war god, like Ares or Tyr. A man appears, commenting on how interested she seems, and the witch calls him Riberu. The mage raises his glass and states that Attila is a truly interesting warrior. Riberu offers her a smabachi cocktail, describing its fragrant and slightly salty flavor. He comments that the poison spreading through his mouth is surprisingly stimulating. Batri Elizabeth calls him Lieber and says he is really quite curious. Then she questions if he isn't interfering a bit too much. Riberu replies that just watching from the sidelines is boring. He confesses his desire to experience the entire life of a bird, and also the existence of a useless man. Soon after, he adds that he wants to know what it's like to live as an insect. Batri comments that it's good his investigative spirit is so strong, but she advises him not to get too caught up in catching insects like a child, and end up killing them by accident, crushing the creature in his own hand. Riberu just replies that he knows, turning to her. Then, he reveals it was all just a joke. Outside, the soldiers celebrate that the Butcher defeated the Lion King, and that the Kiri Mercenary Corps defeated the Golden Lion. The rumor that the Lion King was defeated by the Butcher spreads quickly. After that, the Kiri Mercenary Corps continues to advance, and the tide of the war turns in Gascony's favor. However, citing the exhaustion of both armies, a truce is suddenly established. One of the mercenaries can hardly believe the group was invited to the Duke's residence, calling it all a dream. He celebrates, saying they'll be praised for their military achievements and that they're moving up in the world fast. Attila comments that this is certainly better than when they were hunted like thieves. The man defends himself, stating it was all for survival and that they had no choice. Even so, Attila just questions if that's really how it was. Next, he complains that, honestly, the boss has no compassion at all. Then he turns to the small creature and asks if the bear guy thinks so too. Attila corrects him, saying he's not a bear guy. The mercenary panics and asks them to at least give the little bear a name. Attila looks at the creature on his shoulder and thinks about it. After that, he turns to it and asks if it wants a name. The small white creature vigorously shakes its head no. Even so, Attila suggests picking something that sounds strong. With a smile, he asks what they think of Punch. The creature gets excited by the name and hugs him. Attila asks, surprised, if it liked it. A system window appears, confirming that Punch has been named, leaving him confused. The system then registers Punch as an illusory beast. All accumulated experience is immediately tallied. Suddenly, Punch starts leveling up several times in a row. Attila observes the window and comments that a combat power of 50 is pretty high. Soon after, the system displays the monster inventory option. He wonders what exactly a monster inventory would be. At that moment, a knife whizzes past him, putting him on alert. One of his companions shouts, startled by the surprise attack. The other mercenaries start to question what's happening. Attila pulls on his horse's reins and yells for everyone to be careful. He then draws his weapon, noticing something strange about the thrown knife. It's an assassin's blade, a special hidden weapon used by assassins. Attila is surprised to realize who is behind the attack. A woman dressed in battle attire appears before him. Then, she introduces herself as Caspi Adine. Otto is captivated by Caspi's appearance. However, Attila smacks him hard and tells him not to be careless. The blow knocks him off his horse and sends him to the ground. He gets up shortly after and asks to be treated gently, admitting he's an idiot. Caspi Adine questions if they are really a mercenary corps. She then comments that they seem rather weak. Then she challenges them to see for themselves. She triggers a device that releases several red objects. The items fall around Attila and his companions. Suddenly, they explode on the ground, scaring the horses. The animals panic and begin to thrash violently. The other mercenaries are thrown from their mounts. One of them panics and asks what that is. Attila yells for them not to be afraid, explaining that they're just fireworks. The fallen men stare at him while he considers them a nuisance. With a taunting smile, Caspi warns that this is just the beginning. The special class assassin moves forward and disappears in an instant. Attila is surprised to see she's completely vanished. Soon after, he realizes he's surrounded by enemies in the forest and laments having to deal with this. One of his men is caught in a rope trap on the ground. Attila turns immediately, knowing that stakes have been activated right above. The mercenary screams, realizing that Caspi is a true genius with traps. Attila rushes forward and shoves him out of the way. He warns him that he'll be crushed if he doesn't move. At that moment, Attila's own foot gets stuck in a sticky substance on the ground. The gooey trap holds him completely in place. The stakes fall with full force, hitting the ground and the other mercenaries. Attila yells, calling her a witch. He then activates tactical detection, which reveals countless traps scattered all around. He notices an overwhelming number of them, as if they'd stumbled into a random encounter of fate. A shadow moves quickly between the trees. The assassin smiles, satisfied with the trap's success. Attila gets up and declares that his feet won't get caught like that again. Then, he leaps high into the air, determined to pierce through everything, even what's above. Caspi Adin watches the action, surprised by the sudden reaction. She is astonished to see him climb the tree and wonders what's wrong with that guy. Attila runs through the branches at high speed. He spots her during his last move and confirms there are no more traps nearby. Soon after, he sees her on a higher branch. Attila charges forward, determined to end this once and for all. Caspi launches chains in his direction and yells for him not to come any closer. Attila dodges them with a simple, "Hey!" Still, Caspi smiles and reveals that was just a joke. Then, Attila leaps backward to escape the chains that emerge from below. He then realizes her weapon is a knife attached to a chain. Attila focuses on the approaching attack. Soon after, he ends up completely immobilized by the chains. Caspi warns him that struggling is useless, explaining that the chains are made of dwarven steel and could rip his arm off. With a confident smile, Attila replies that's exactly why he's warning her. Then, he begins to shatter the chains, yelling that this isn't enough. Caspi screams in shock as she's captured. She hangs from a tree, demanding to be released at once. Attila questions her about who hired her. She refuses to answer, stating that an assassin would never reveal a client's identity. With no other choice, he activates the mind's eye. The assassin curses that bastard Roland for not warning her about someone so powerful. From this, Attila deduces that Roland is the one who hired her. The so-called truce between Aquitaine and Gascony is then revealed. On the surface, the official reason was the exhaustion of both armies. However, the true reason is the escalating succession dispute within Gascony. He finds it despicable that they're still trying to kill mercenaries on their own side, just like in the original story. With a slight smile, he decides he must ensure Saxon becomes the successor. Attila gathers his men to leave, and Caspi asks where they are going. One of the mercenaries says goodbye, calling her Kitty, while a crow watches from a nearby branch. Attila and his men arrive at Duke Gascony's mansion. One of the mercenaries gets excited by the size of the place, exclaiming that Gascony is extremely wealthy. Attila simply tells them to keep moving. They enter the mansion's luxurious hall. The group is impressed by what they see. Everyone marvels at the refined decor and the abundant food. Otto, the demon sword, asks if he can have a taste, but Attila tells him to mind his manners. A man approaches, welcomes them, and thanks them for coming. Attila and Otto turn in surprise to face their host. He introduces himself as Saxon Gascony, the second son of the Gascony family. Otto recognizes him as the benefactor who hired them and thanks him for everything. Saxon thanks the Curie Mercenary Corps, stating that thanks to them, many soldiers returned alive. The men react modestly, while Otto offers to recount their deeds in detail. Another person approaches and identifies them as the Curie Mercenary Corps. It is Roland Gascony, the eldest son of the Gascony family. Saxon calls out to his brother, Roland. He turns and states he can't believe that bandit trash like them had the nerve to show up here. He then threatens them, saying he won't show any mercy if they step out of line. The guards immediately get into an attack formation. Otto, confused, asks if they did something wrong. He wonders if it was because he ate earlier, and Attila replies, maybe. Attila identifies Roland as the one responsible for the assassination attempt. He notes that, just like in the original story, Roland is still arrogant and full of pride. Saxon intervenes, asking if that attitude isn't rude toward the war heroes. Roland tells his brother to shut up and asks if that's any way to speak to his elder, accusing him of already acting like the successor. Saxon replies that Roland is the one behaving inappropriately. The elder brother just grumbles and walks away. Saxon turns back to the mercenaries and apologizes for the embarrassing scene. He takes his leave and tells them to enjoy the reception without any worries. Otto comments on the sibling rivalry, but Attila asks if he can really eat in a situation like this. Duke Gascony asks everyone to raise raise their glasses. The head of the Gascony family toasts to the glorious future that awaits them. The mercenaries toast together, and Otto compliments the quality of the wine. Attila takes a sip and notices something strange. Suddenly, Duke Gascony starts coughing up blood. He collapses to the floor as the guests scream for his grace. Unexpectedly, the Duke starts coughing up a lot of blood, clutching his neck. He then collapses completely on the floor as everyone shouts his title. Desperate, his son rushes forward and yells, calling for his father. Running to help, a man kneels and checks the Duke's condition. With a shocked expression, he shouts to everyone that the Duke is dead. Upon hearing the news, all the guests in the hall are completely shocked. A short distance away, a young man watches the entire commotion with a serious look. Turning to the young man, Roland points at him as the one to blame for everything. Loudly, he shouts, accusing Zaxxon of murdering his father. Completely surprised, Zaxxon denies the accusation, saying he didn't do it. At that, the mansion guards move in and quickly surround the young man. Outraged, Zaxxon yells, asking Roland the meaning of all this. Gesturing to his soldiers, Roland accuses him of bringing bandits into the mansion. Refuting the accusation, he says he sees the scheme and that this is no time to argue. Roland insists, shouting that he's lying and attacked his father to become the heir. Pointing to his companions, Roland yells that Zaxxon used them in his plan. Amid the confusion, the other nobles watch everything with frightened expressions. Keeping his cool, Zaxxon faces his accuser, realizing he only has power. Roland then declares that if the assassination failed, the next step is execution. Analyzing the guards, Zaxxon understands that he is stronger than in the story. Completely surrounded, he and his group see the spears pointed in their direction. His men then prepare to fight back, ready for combat, but Zaxxon immediately shouts, ordering them not to interfere at all. He warns that if they attack, there will be no room for any explanation. Looking for a way out, he activates his special ability called Mind's Eye. Just then, an unexpected system window appears before him with an error message. The message states that the ability doesn't work on a target of unknown identity. He's confused, wondering what this unknown identity could be. Looking at his enemy, he wonders if that isn't Roland. Then he grinds his teeth, considering it might be a look-alike disguised as an assassin. Dismissing the idea of a disguise, he knows the scent would give him away. Pointing at the group, Roland orders the guards to finish them all. The soldiers then advance with their spears, preparing to attack the group. Shouting in desperation, one of his men asks what they should do. Without hesitation, he grabs a golden object that was on the table. Seeing the unexpected action, Roland just watches with a surprised expression. With a quick, strong movement, he hurls the object in his direction. Startled, the guards duck as the object flies past them. The projectile then hits Roland squarely, violently piercing through his chest. Creating a huge hole, the attack goes right through the middle of his chest. Completely shocked, his companions scream in disbelief at what just happened. Everyone in the hall panics, and a guard orders his immediate capture. Worried about the situation, his man calls him by his title, Chief. He then senses something in the air, a power his senses can't pick up. Even wounded, Roland smiles and says that this is unfair for a human. As his chest wound regenerates, chains begin to appear around him. Astonished, his men shout, not understanding what the hell that is. Understanding the situation, he realizes it can only be some kind of magic. Suddenly, various objects in the hall begin to levitate and fly through the air. As he's pushed back, he sees a strange feather floating in the middle of the chaos. That feather continues to float in the center of the hall, completely intact after the explosion. Changing scenes, a mysterious hand calmly holds a glass of wine. He is revealed to be the monarch of Del Bel's terrace, observing the conflict. With a smile, he comments that the situation is getting more and more interesting. Back at the mansion, an emergency mission screen appears for the protagonist. He then stares at the notification, surprised by what's appearing before him. His mission requires him to defeat the Crow Monarch for a reward. Coming from the sky, a massive attack strikes the building's structure with full force. Trying to shield themselves from the shockwave, the group endures the impact. Before the crowd, a sorcerer appears, displaying all of his great power. The narration explains that sorcerers are beings with power incomprehensible to humans. It continues, saying they are in existence far superior to humanity. Using his power, he attacks the group of people all at once. Running through the area, one of the young men shouts in surprise at what he sees. Then the narration compares the situation to a bird hunting an insect. The sorcerer's attack continues, hitting several people who scream on the ground. The narration then concludes that it's impossible for a human to defeat a sorcerer. From a distance, the group observes the many fallen bodies after the devastating attack. Among the fallen, a hand rises as the person makes a sound. Immediately after, the man turns towards the group and growls. Pointing ahead, one of the companions shouts about that thing that appeared. At that, Several other people get up and advance slowly towards them. Seeing the approaching horde, he yells that the situation is terrible. Just then, the young man in the red scarf warns that they're coming with everything they've got. Led by the sorcerer, the controlled people run towards the group. As he's attacked by the horde, the man shouts, asking for a protective shield. Trying to stop the advance, the mercenaries form a barrier with their shields. Taking advantage of the distraction, he attacks one of the controlled individuals with a quick strike. Right after the blow, he plants his feet firmly on the ground, ready to fight. As the fight rages on, the entire group faces the horde head-on. Seeing the crowd, he prepares a powerful two-handed attack. He wonders if it's impossible, as he cannot kill the soldiers. With difficulty, the mercenary tells his chief that there are too many to hold back. He decides there's no time and he must defeat Liebel alone. Now, watching everything, the sorcerer smiles and makes a gesture with his hand. Suddenly, he notices something forming on the ground around him. At that, magic circles appear on the ground, surrounding the entire group of mercenaries. Suddenly, the circles on the ground explode with tremendous force. Caught by surprise, he yells as he tries to shield himself from the blast. He realizes it's a combination of the soldiers' attacks and magic from a distance. Without letting up, the sorcerer launches another magical attack in their direction. Hit squarely, he's thrown back without an opening to counter. Beside him, a soldier is defeated and cries out for help. Watching his men get cut down, he wonders what he should do. Observing everything, the sorcerer just grumbles with an air of superiority. He then says he's starting to get bored with the situation. Preparing a new attack, he asks if it isn't time to end this. Seeing the power forming, one of the mercenaries shouts in complete terror. A gigantic spell appears in the sky, and he asks what that is. He just stares at the power forming above him, unable to react. The narration explains that this is the power of a sorcerer. Then the narration says he needs the Muhul sword to defend himself. Worried, he hears the small creature on his shoulder make a sound. He then yells for his companion, Punch, to get inside to protect himself. Right after, a system notification pops up right in front of him. Confirming the command, the creature responds and activates the monster inventory. He then calls for his companion, Punch, preparing for the fight. It's explained that Punch is a guardian beast capable of storing items. Activating the inventory, he yells for his sword, the mighty Muhyul. The small creature opens its mouth wide, ready to release the sword. Suddenly, the creature starts to choke, and he asks what's wrong. Without warning, the creature spits the sword out of its mouth. With a swift move, he finally wields his legendary sword, Mu Yul. Seeing the bizarre scene, the mercenaries are completely paralyzed with confusion. The sorcerer just smirks and asks what that was supposed to be. Now armed, he yells at the sorcerer to shut his mouth. He warns his opponent that his laughter won't last much longer. As he finishes speaking, he charges full speed toward his opponent. Seeing the attack, the sorcerer smiles and remarks that it's quite good. He then raises his hand and begins to gather his own power. Confidently, he declares he will show him the difference in their league. From above, an immense mass of power descends upon the battlefield. Seeing the wave coming, one of the men warns that the attack is on its way. The energy then surges rapidly toward everyone in the hall. Leaping over the tentacles, he prepares for an aerial counterattack. Wielding the sword with both hands, he prepares a devastating blow. With a vertical slash, he splits the enormous mass of power in half. The force of the impact throws the mercenaries far from the fight. Seeing his attack split apart, the sorcerer stares intently at the warrior. Pushed back by the shockwave, he struggles to stay on his feet. He explains that this is no ordinary sword, as it holds divine protection. He then reveals that his sword is actually an anti-magic weapon. Excited by this turn of events, the mercenaries shout their leader's name. He questions how his magic was broken by a warrior with no magical power. He then comments that the power of the eastern tribes is immense. With a smile on his face, the sorcerer says, "This is all very amusing." He then prepares a new spell and asks what he thinks of it. Ready to fight, the warrior calls for his companion Punch to advance with him. The sorcerer then launches several energy spheres in his direction. He defends himself with the sword, managing to block the incoming attacks. Finding the scene incredible, the sorcerer praises his opponent's skill. While cutting through the magic, he yells that it hurts, and the attacks won't stop. It's then explained that to stop the magic, the circle must be destroyed. Finding nothing nearby, he realizes there is no magic circle. Confused, he wonders how this is possible without a large circle. From above, the sorcerer asks what he's looking for, saying it's right there. Looking at the sorcerer, the warrior finally understands the situation. Immediately, he leaps with great force toward the enemy in the air. With a powerful shout, he hurls his sword with all his might. Surprised, the sorcerer wonders if he threw the sword just to hit him. Flying high, the sword aims directly for the chandelier on the ceiling. Seeing the target, The sorcerer realizes the plan and is completely shocked. With a direct hit, the sword shatters the large chandelier. Falling from the ceiling, it pierces the magic circle hidden there. Upon hitting the floor, the sword causes a huge explosion of magical power. Desperate, he yells, asking what has been done to his magic circle. He keeps shouting that he can't create magic and that it's all over. Changing his tune, he smiles and says it was just a joke. Even without his weapon, the warrior quickly charges at the sorcerer. He explains he can create a smaller magic circle at any time. Launching an attack, he warns that this is enough for someone unarmed. Seeing the attack, he yells, activating his monster inventory again. He then extends his hand, calling once more for his sword, Mu-Hyul. But this time, the creature just bites his arm with great force. Without the sword, he hurls the creature itself at the sorcerer. Confused, the sorcerer yells at him to wait and stop what he's doing. Screaming for him to die, he charges at his enemy with everything he's got. Getting close, he lands a powerful punch directly on the sorcerer's face. With the final blow, the sorcerer completely dissolves in front of him. The force of the punch goes through him and destroys the wall at the back of the hall. He then realizes he felt no resistance when the punch landed. Not understanding, he stands still, trying to process what just happened. Soon after, several black feathers begin to fall slowly from the ceiling. Looking up, he sees the sorcerer fleeing and bidding him farewell. He then yells at the bastard to wait and not run from the fight. Already far away, the crow says it was fun fighting Attila. He continues saying it's amusing for a mage to be defeated by a human. But suddenly, something strikes the crow mid-flight. Extending his hand, the warrior warns that he won't let him escape. On the ground, the crow is impaled by a spear that appears out of nowhere. The spear then begins to dissolve the crow's body with its power. Seeing this, he is surprised by the unexpected turn of events. As it's being destroyed, the crow lets out a final scream of pain and agony. As he is being destroyed, the crow realizes the situation has turned very bad for him. As he dissolves, he screams about the divine artifact that struck him. Before the warrior, the sorcerer's body finally vanishes completely. Tired after the fight, he wonders if he has finally defeated him. With the mage's defeat, the controlled soldiers stand motionless. Slowly, they begin to come to their senses, asking what happened. One of the mercenaries then yells that the soldiers are back to normal. Celebrating wildly, the entire group of mercenaries shouts that they've finally won. Soon after, one of his companions runs toward his boss to talk to him. Getting close, he complains that the boss should have told them about the sword. Telling him to shut up, the boss says he should have helped instead. The mercenary then makes an excuse, and the boss agrees it was a dangerous opponent. Looking at his side, the mercenary calls out to him again with concern. With a frightened expression, he yells that his boss is bleeding. Unable to hold on any longer, he finally collapses and starts to fall. Seeing his boss fall, the mercenary shouts his name in complete desperation. The scene changes, and the sorcerer reappears elsewhere, saying it was fun. Speaking to a woman, he says that if Batory hadn't saved him, he would have died. Using her magic on him, she replies that she didn't exactly save him. She then explains that she is only regenerating a part of his body. As she speaks, she holds a fragment of his soul in her hands to continue the process. Asking her not to be so cold, he reminds her that they are almost one and the same. With a smile, he asks if she was mad that he tried to kill Attila. Just staring back at him, she lets out a grunt of complete disapproval. Denying she's angry, she listens as he insists that she is. She then admits she is, but says she also feels very grateful. Explaining why, she says that Attila proved himself capable of wielding Mu-Hyul. Furthermore, she says that his defeat at Attila's hands made her certain. Without a word, he watches her with a look of utter confusion. Revealing her plan, she says that Attila will rule the world with much bloodshed, and she concludes by saying he is the berserker who will fulfill their dream. Being licked in the face, he grumbles as he slowly wakes up in bed. Annoyed by the situation, he complains about the smell and tells his companion to stop. Right after, he sits up and angrily shouts Punch's name. Looking around the room, he wonders where he could be. Just then, a system window pops up in front of him with an important notification. Seeing the screen, he questions if the sudden quest has already been completed. Remembering the fight, he says he passed out right after defeating the crow. Then, a new window appears, informing him that it will grant his rewards. Reading the information, he sees he's gained a party system and a skill. Analyzing the new power, he wonders if the warrior's roar is strong. Confident, he concludes that the skill he gained will be the strongest of all. Celebrating, he says he's going to defeat the crow, but the system informs him that it's still alive. A narration explains that it doesn't die just from having its head cut off. He then says that, as the author, he's the one who knows that fact best. Suddenly, a voice from outside alerts him to the bedroom door. Entering the room, the mercenary asks in surprise if the boss is already awake. He then tells his other companion to go call everyone immediately. Seeing his desperation, the boss asks Otto what happened. At this, He replies that he was very worried about the whole situation. Arriving shortly after, the other mercenaries ask if the boss is okay. Celebrating, they say the boss has come back to life, but he tells them he never died. Shortly after, evidence regarding the murder of Duke Gascony was discovered. With this, the true mastermind, Laurent, was finally arrested for his treason. Saxon then officially became the new Duke of the Gascony territory. Over at the bar, the mercenaries celebrate and toast with their reward money. Toasting with his boss, he comments that the fight is finally over. Agreeing, he says that Gascony can now finally rest in peace. Curious, the mercenary asks the boss about his plans for the future. Just then, Saxon arrives at the bar and formally calls for Lord Attila. He asks if his body is feeling better now, saying he's fine. He thanks Saxon for letting him rest. Saxon then announces that he's brought the items he had promised them. Seeing the treasure chest, he says he's been looking forward to this. Finding it unfair, a mercenary complains that the boss can't take everything for himself. Looking at his companions, he prepares to give a good response. He then says that they're just being greedy. Laughing at the situation, Saxon reveals the chest contains the deed to the territory. Confused by the revelation, they ask what territory he's talking about. He then confirms he will deliver it all directly to Sir Otto. Unable to believe what he's hearing, Otto asks if the gift is really for him. Pointing to his friend, he confirms that the territory is now all his. Extremely excited, Otto asks if he can become a noble again. With the deed in his hands, he celebrates, shouting that he's escaped poverty. Everyone then toasts together, shouting, "Long live the new lord." Shortly after, they also toast, shouting, "Long live Lord Attila." After the party ends, the night is quiet outside the tavern. The next day, he sets off alone on his horse toward the city. Hearing his companion grumble, he says he has no other choice now. He thinks that from now on, he will fight enemies with magical power. He concludes that leaving Otto and the others behind was the right decision. With a serious face, he prepares for the new journey ahead. Saying, "Let's go," he begins to ride down the road alone. After riding for a bit, he turns around upon hearing a noise from behind. Right behind him, Otto follows, shouting for him to wait. Surprised, he just stares as his friend quickly approaches on the path. Riding with a smile, Otto keeps laughing as he gets closer and closer. Raising his hand, Otto shouts with all his might that he's coming along. Looking back, he just watches Otto approaching on his horse. Annoyed, he asks if Otto is still drunk from yesterday's party. Denying it, Otto says he used to leave everything to his subordinates when he was a noble. He then proudly says there's no problem if he isn't there. Losing his patience, he says their contract is over, and he doesn't need to follow him. Pausing, Otto says that in the beginning, he hated his boss. Confused by what he hears, he asks what he just said, but Otto explains that no matter what, he always protected everyone. He continues, saying he gave status and territory to former bandits. He finishes by saying he now wants to see more of the world with him. Hearing the speech, he just thinks his friend has really gone crazy. Next, he sees Otto holding a rein and asks what it is. The small creature on his shoulder also wonders what he's doing. Tired of the situation, he just sighs and continues his journey down the road. Seeing his friend go on, he says he can do whatever he wants. With a very happy face, Otto shouts that he finally got what he wanted. He then asks the boss what their next destination will be. Leaving Gascony, they ride together with Otto shouting right behind him. The narration explains that he now travels with a knight and a bear. Across the fields, Otto shouts, asking him to at least say where they're going. Changing scenes, the story focuses on the residence of the Lord of Aquitaine. Standing at the door, the guards hear a voice asking them to wait a minute. Inside, a knight questions the idea of bringing an assassin there. In disbelief, he slams the table and says it's impossible. He then shouts in anger, saying that man killed his companion, Ruach. Seated, the leader says that Attila defeated him, and his strength is undeniable. He continues, explaining that Attila would be very useful as a new ally. Even so, the knight shouts that he cannot accept that decision at all. At this, the leader announces he will bring him in after defeating him in combat. He then reveals that with Attila, he can become even stronger. Shocked by the revelation, the knight just stares at his leader without a word. Shifting to the forest, night falls as their journey continues. Hidden in the bushes, a mysterious eye watches the two of them intently. As they eat by the campfire, a giant snake attacks and Otto screams. Without even stopping his meal, he easily grabs the creature by the neck. Right after, he throws the creature far away without any difficulty. Worried, Otto asks if they can't take a safer route. He replies that they're going to defeat a mage, so safety doesn't matter. Otto then asks if the Crow Lord is really alive, and he confirms it. Extending his hand, he asks Punch to bring him the Muhyil sword. At that, the small creature helps him roast the snake over the fire. Suddenly, the Muhyil sword begins to react with an intense power. Sensing the sword's reaction, he leaps up, startling Otto, and the system detects the observer's magical energy. In response, the sword shoots a beam of light that startles Otto. He then explains that Muhyul has memorized the energy and decided its fate. Turning suddenly, he startles Otto, who asks what just happened. He then shows that the piece of meat on the stick is burnt. With the burnt meat in hand, Otto complains that his food is completely ruined. Sitting by the campfire, they continue eating peacefully in the middle of the forest. Now calmer, Otto eats a new piece of meat without any trouble. Beside him, his boss and the mascot also continue with their dinner. Unbeknownst to them, a huge creature watches everything from behind the trees. Baring its teeth, the giant wolf stares intently at the two of them. Shortly after, a pack of wolves runs towards the campfire. Seeing the pack approach, Otto screams in fear at the threat. He finds it strange, as wolves shouldn't have left the forest. Just then, a system window appears with a mission to defeat the pack. With the mission, he gets a vision of the sorcerer behind it all. Realizing it's a setup, he wonders what the mage is plotting now. At his side, Otto unsheathes his sword, ready for battle. Wielding his weapon, he prepares to face the approaching threat. Seeing his friend frozen, he calls out and tells him to get ready. Then, he warns that the attack is coming, and tells Otto to take one down. He then gives a slight smile, confident in his plan for the fight. Desperate, Otto shouts that there's no way he can face the monster. Telling him to stop complaining, he says that Otto will be fine. Next, the party system pops up, asking if he wants to form a party. He then tells Otto to do his best and try to survive. Charging first, Otto attacks one of the wolves with a powerful strike. After the attack, he pauses for a moment, breathless from the effort of combat. Defending against the attack, Otto manages to stop the wolf's advance with his sword. Right after, he exchanges a few more direct blows with the beast. He then realizes he's actually managing to fight and wonders if he's strong. Dodging the attack, he throws himself to the side to avoid being caught. Then he lets out a powerful cry and prepares for a counterattack. Charging at the creature, he finally lands a fatal blow to its chest. Taking the hit, the wolf is thrown back and falls, defeated. After his victory, he gives a confident smile at the outcome of the fight. He tells himself he's overcome difficult situations and decides to go help his boss. Meanwhile, his boss defeats a wolf just by stepping on it. Without wasting a moment, he grabs another wolf and swings it around to attack the others. With a powerful move, he hurls the creature into the rest of the pack. While fighting the wolves, he just starts laughing uncontrollably. Watching the scene, Otto thinks his boss is more of a monster than the actual monsters. Fighting the wolves, he lands a direct hit on the enormous creature. After defeating the pack, he stands still with a serious expression. He then thinks that luckily, the opponent was just a wolf. The narration explains that monsters in this world are different from those in manga and anime. With a swift movement, he charges toward the next enemy in the forest. Landing a punch, he demonstrates a level of power far beyond normal. Without giving it time to react, seeing this, the large alpha wolf lets out a loud snarl. Preparing an attack, he glares at the creature with a furious expression. Looking to the side, he yells for his companion Punch to join the battle. Answering the call, Punch runs in and strikes the giant wolf. After defeating the wolf, Punch levels up and celebrates the victory. Meanwhile, he just watches Otto fight his own wolf. Just then, the system announces that the party effects are now active. Watching the fight, he notes that his friend is doing very well. Ready to fight, he says it's finally time to end this. With a smile, he announces that there is only one left to defeat. Seeing the situation, the last wolf tries to escape by running into the forest. Leaping to attack, he declares that he won't let the creature escape. On top of the wolf, he readies his final blow with the axe. But suddenly, a chain scythe is thrown in their direction. The chain wraps precisely around the handle of his axe. His axe is yanked away, and the wolf manages to escape. The force of the impact throws Otto far away, and he screams in surprise. Now holding the chain, he wonders if Caspi has finally shown up. Looking into the forest, he remains thoughtful about who the enemy could be. As the chain retracts into the woods, he praises his opponent's good intuition. Shortly after, the chain begins to be pulled back in. Quickly, he wraps the chain around his arm to stop it from getting away. From the woods, a voice warns that they'll kill him without him ever knowing their name. Holding the chain tightly, he says that as for their name, he reveals he already knows, calling him Sabah of the chain scythe. Stepping out of the shadows, Sabah is seen holding his weapon in the middle of the forest. Hidden in the bushes, he glares at his target with a serious expression. Holding the chain, he stands still, waiting for the enemy's next move. He then identifies him as Saba, one of the 7 master assassins. Suddenly, Saba swiftly throws another chain weapon at him. The attack strikes the axe on the ground head-on. With a quick punch, he deflects the chain coming his way. Leaping into the attack, Saba finally emerges from his hiding spot in the forest. Seeing his reaction, Saba is surprised and doesn't understand what happened. Just then, the small creature on his shoulder lets out a loud roar. Taking his weapon back, he says it's okay to continue. He then tells Punch to go ahead and help their companion, Otto. Now alone, he wonders if they should test that other skill as well. Clenching his fist, he prepares for the fight about to begin. With a punch to the ground, he unleashes a powerful wave of energy. Engulfed by the energy, he gets ready to use his new skill. With a mighty roar, he finally activates Warrior's Roar. At that moment, the system announces that the group's strength and stamina have increased. From deep within the forest, a scream echoes, catching everyone's attention. Fighting the wolf, Otto hears the voice and recognizes his boss. Elsewhere, Otto now faces a new and mysterious adversary. With agility, he dodges the enemy's attacks and manages to counterattack. As he fights, he notices his opponent has become easier to handle. Surprised by his strength, she asks if he was hiding his power. Charging at him, she unleashes a swift strike in his direction. With an agile move, she dodges underneath him and throws him off balance. Jumping on his back, she immobilizes him with a precise blow. With her dagger to his neck, she warns him that this is the end. Suddenly, Punch appears and charges full speed at the enemy. With a quick movement, she retreats far from her opponent. Then, Otto approaches Punch with a smile on his face, ready to help. Watching from a distance, she just stares at the group standing still in the middle of the forest. She then thinks to herself that they are strong, just as her master had said. Elsewhere, he fights Saba using his chain scythe. With a powerful blow, Saba hurls his weapon at his opponent, but with agility, he dodges the attack, using his own weapon to defend himself. While dodging, he continues to carefully analyze the enemy's movements. Using his chain, Saba launches an attack that sends several clones flying. After the attack, he pauses for a moment to catch his breath from the battle. Facing each other, the two stare one another down before the next move. He then asks if the master is worried about his apprentice in her fight. Without answering, Saba just turns slightly to the side and watches. He then says that Attila overpowered Caspi, but didn't kill her in the end. Enraged, Saba yells that he saw through his despicable wolf's heart. Not understanding at all, he just stares back with a confused expression. Saba glares at the warrior slowly approaching him. He then explains that if he fails, Caspi will be the organization's next target. With his eyes closed, he continues to process the information he just heard. With a smirk, he activates the mind's eye ability to analyze. Outraged, Saba says he won't forgive the beast who dared to target Caspi. With a slight smile, he finally understands the whole situation. He then explains that assassins don't usually do well against warriors. Assassins usually aim for a single strike and then flee to await their next chance. But Saba exposed himself and confronted him directly on the battlefield. The narration concludes that his feelings for his disciple drove him mad. He then smiles, preparing to exploit this weakness in his enemy. Charging into the attack, Otto runs toward his own opponent. He then thinks that he didn't know Saba was such a wild guy. As he defends the attack, he realizes that in this state of rage, with a quick move, he grabs Saba's hand and disarms him. Immediately after, he forcefully throws him high into the air. He then concludes that he can win easily if he's careful about that. Fallen on the ground, Saba pulls himself together and prepares for his next move. Leaping backward, he throws his chain to create some distance, but suddenly, he appears right behind Saba, catching him by surprise. Startled, Saba wonders how he got there so fast. With a quick blow, he unleashes an attack that Saba manages to dodge. Without losing momentum, he keeps advancing, closing the distance between them. Annoyed, Saba wonders why he's always one step ahead. With a kick, he hits Saba's weapon, sending it flying. Hit. Saba is thrown backward by the force of the powerful impact. Just then, his axe begins to react with the weapon's chain. Seeing the attack, Saba realizes he read all his moves. On the ground, he plants a hand to keep from falling completely. Lying on the ground, Saba decides he needs to use his last resort now. With a determined expression, he announces that he has no choice but to use it. Then, he charges full force at the warrior, screaming in a fury. Feeling the pressure, he recognizes the assassin's ultimate technique with a smile. Getting very close, Saba delivers a direct blow to the warrior's chest. With a mighty shout, he reveals the name of his annihilation technique. Seeing the attack, he just gives a slight smirk without flinching. After the attack, the forest falls silent for a brief moment. Standing, Saba unleashes a powerful energy from his clenched fist. Panting, he wonders if he's finally managed to defeat his opponent. But suddenly, his opponent appears right behind him, completely unharmed. Surprised, Saba can't react, seeing that his attack didn't work. He then asks if Saba is trying to throw his life away. Frightened by the situation, Saba just stares at him, his face sweating. Gazing at the forest, he prepares to leave the battlefield. With that, he and his opponent quickly flee the area together. Hearing the noise, he wonders if someone is around. Standing, he just grumbles and watches the forest intently. Going back in time a bit, Otto is fighting Caspi and Punch together. With a shout, Caspi charges forward, striking several times with her daggers. Shouting back, Otto manages to defend against all the incoming attacks. Seeing his strength, Caspi wonders why things turned out this way. While fighting, Caspi hears a strange noise coming from the forest behind her. Seeing an opening, Otto yells that now is the time to attack. Leaping towards her, he delivers a powerful blow with his sword. Annoyed, she curses as she tries to defend against his surprise attack. Suddenly, Saba appears in front of her and takes the hit in her place. In a defensive stance, Otto barely manages to block Saba's attack. Watching the scene, Caspi is surprised by what just happened. Running to her master, she calls out to him, worried about his condition. Not understanding, she just watches him with a surprised look on her face. Calling out to her, Saba prepares to give his final instructions. He then says that for a while, she must go with those people. With no other choice, Caspi simply agrees to her master's order. Watching his apprentice, Saba remains silent for a brief moment. Then, he turns and begins to walk slowly away from the area. As he moves away, Saba bids farewell to his apprentice with a final gesture. Fading into the shadows, he tells Caspi to survive everything. Watching her master leave, she just calls out his name, her face filled with worry. Suddenly, a torch lights up in the darkness of the night forest. Next, a group of knights arrives at the scene with their torches. Looking at the battle scene, one of the knights turns to his leader. With a serious expression, the red-haired knight confirms the information. On the ground, several giant wolves lie completely lifeless. Looking at the scene, the leader gives a satisfied smirk. He then asks if he really defeated all the wolves by himself. Annoyed, he asks how many times he has to repeat himself. Angrily, the knight shouts that he can't believe such nonsense. He then says with a smile that he doesn't have to believe it if he doesn't want to. Facing each other, the two stare one another down with tension. From a distance, a voice shouts, calling for their master in the middle of the forest. Emerging from the forest, Otto and Caspi run towards Attila. Seeing Otto with Caspi, he asks why he's with her. Standing far off, he just watches the two of them slowly approach. Annoyed, Caspi yells that her name is Caspi, not that thing. Pointing his sword, the knight asks who they are and their affiliation. He faces the red-haired knight who confronts him. Asking who he is, Attila glares at him with a disdainful expression. At that, the other knights shout at him to know his place. He then recognizes Arno, the son of Margrave Heinrich Stefan. Stepping forward, Otto introduces himself as the Baron of Beltran. The knights wonder if he's the war hero Otto, but one of them comments that he looks more like a common bandit. Arno then says that if he is Otto, he must have the seal. Pointing his sword, he prepares to confront the group. He then warns that they will not escape the crime of impersonating heroes. Running towards the group, a knight calls out for Lord Arno. Getting closer, he says he has an important report to deliver. He then whispers the information in Arno's ear, making him serious. Hearing the report, Arno's expression changes, and he becomes worried. With that, he informs the group that the situation is an emergency. Challenging Otto, he demands he prove his strength if it's really him. From a distance, Otto and Caspi watch the situation with serious expressions. Perched on his shoulder, the small creature glares at everyone with great anger. Pointing his sword, he calls him a killer and challenges him as well.